Good afternoon and welcome to the BL Labs Symposium 2020. My name is Maya Maricevic. I'm Head of Higher Education and Science at the BL Library, and I will be today co-hosting this event together with Mahendra Mahey, who has been a BL Labs lead and has led the labs from strength to strength to the last 8 years. Mahendra, I wonder if you could give a wave to everyone so people know who we are. There he is. Excellent. And I also want to give an early shout to our team behind the scenes, Robin, Felipe, Ruth, Daniel. You will interact with many of them in the chat, and we are very grateful for everyone's help to make this event possible today. We are delighted that you are with us today. It is a good way for us to end this, let's face it, frankly, terrible year. Hopefully we will reflect on some of the changes in all our lives, but most of all, what we want to do today is to celebrate all those who made this year so much better and have pushed boundaries of digital work in research, in education, in arts, in community activism. We are so conscious that this year has been so different, and that for many, this has been maybe the first time that their research, their work, their education has been predominantly digital. It's almost as everything around us has been one huge and unplanned lab. Medical, unfortunately, but also digital. We are hoping today that to pass the message that all this digital work is not an isolated activity, and that in many cases it's been a way to connect, to achieve new things, and to support other people and to support social change. And especially this year, we want to put focus on struggle for racial equality, galvanized by Black Lives Matter. I hope that you will be inspired today by all our speakers and see many examples of such work. There is few practicalities that I need to let you know about before we start. So this session today is being recorded and we will be making it available, and I believe it's already running live on YouTube. We don't have this year, unfortunately, any ways to have a nice in-person human networking that we usually do with BL Labs, but there are many ways in which you can interact with us today. So if you have questions for any of us, for our speakers, you can put them in the Q&A function on Zoom. Or if you want to chat with each other or with us, please use the chat function. You also might want to use social media. On the slides that's currently on the screen, you can see various handles for social media that we use. Also, you can see a variety of different links. So there is a symposium page where you can find the program and everything that will happen today. And also the colleagues are putting all these links into the chat, so you can go and you can follow the links and find different information from there. The one thing that we are doing today, in addition to our normal awards, we are having a People's Vote Award. So you all will have an opportunity to interact with us in this way as well, to look at our awards and to cast your own vote. And the links of this are also on the screen, on the Menti, as you can see, and also the links are being put into the chat so you can follow them from there. The voting will be open until just after 4 p.m. Sorry, just before 4 p.m. and we will remind you when this comes and when we are closing the vote. We expect that our electoral college is going to be mega efficient and that we are going to announce the winner just after the final speaker. So I think this is all practicalities for me at the moment. So all that's left from me now is to introduce our first speaker to launch us into today. And we're very pleased to have with us Ruth Anath. Ruth is a professor of literary history and digital humanities at Queen Mary, University of London. Some of you might have seen her recent work, the excellent interactive visualization done for the HRC project Student Network and Power, and also book, The Network Turn, Changing Perspectives into Humanities, co-authored with Sebastian Annette, Catherine Coleman, and Scott Weingart. Ruth is also a principal investigator of a project called Living with Machines, a huge digital research collaboration between the Alan Turing Institute, the UK AI and Data Science Institute, British Library and Universities of Exeter, East Anglia, Cambridge and Queen Mary. and we have been very fortunate to work with Ruth as one of our closest collaborators, and her knowledge, wisdom, and leadership were having great impact on us during this project, and especially this year as we are pushing both boundaries of research, but also how to do things and how to continue to collaborate despite all the restriction. So I'm delighted to introduce to you Ruth Annette, and over to you, Ruth.
Thank you so much for those really kind words, Maya. It's really lovely. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. This is where things will probably go wrong. There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, firstly, thank you again, Maya, for that really kind introduction, and thank you for having me here today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be invited first to join the BL Labs Advisory Board and now to give the annual keynote. BL Labs are doing so much work to find ways to make the library's digitised collections accessible and to inspire very creative new uses of them. And judging the competition, it has been really exciting to see how researchers, artists, and GLAM professionals are engaging with those collections. And as we're going to see later, the results are really startling and genuinely inspiring. I'm speaking today as a researcher leading a team of collaborators on the project that Maya mentioned called Living with Machines that is also using BL collections alongside other data sets. What I'm going to be speaking about is the experience of doing this kind of work from the perspective of a traditional humanities discipline, where we more normally speak about sources than data, and the model for scholarship is the lone scholar. And for that reason, as has become standard for me now, I have not put my name on this opening slide, but rather produced a slide that credits the full team. My observations today are from my perspective, but the work I'm sharing is very much the result of a very highly collaborative project that is made up of people from backgrounds in history and data science, research software engineering. There's curators and library professionals, computational linguists and literary historians, digital humanists, and a specialist in urban analytics. And it's worth pausing for a moment to think about how a humanities scholar ends up doing work like this, where it is collaborative and data-driven. And I can only really tell this story from my perspective because everyone on the project has their own version of that narrative. Some people are trained specifically in the digital humanities, and that places them in a really great position for analysing cultural data computationally. However, when I started thinking about archival collections as data, I didn't even know that there was a discipline called digital humanities. I had been doing my PhD on literature written in prisons during the 16th century. I was looking at library and archives holding manuscript versions of such works, including letters written in prison by the Marian martyrs, so the men and women put to death by Mary I for their Protestant faith. When my other half got a visiting fellowship at a network science lab in the US, and I started reading up on network analysis, I had the idea that I could use letters to reconstruct communication networks and analyze them using some of the computational methods that I was learning about. Now, that idea then got put on hold to finish the PhD, start a couple of new jobs, finish a book before I came back to it in 2012. The library in question had not digitized their collection, and they even said no to photographing the letters for my personal use. Their catalogue entries were just the printed entries by M.R. James from 1901. So I sat in the library and created my own metadata for about 300 letters. And then with my other half, we wrote and finally published an article that combined my expertise in that particular collection with his skills in network analysis to talk about how persecuted Protestants maintained an underground community during a period of intense persecution. And the article actually came out a couple of years later, details on the bottom right. The success of this small study encouraged us to scale up those methods to a much larger collection of over 130,000 letters that we extracted from the data underlying the state papers online, which was shared with us by Gail. This became the basis for the AHRC-funded project Tudor Networks of Power that ran 2015 to 2018. And two of the outputs are mentioned shown on the right here. The interactive visualization that Maya kindly mentioned in her introduction that came out last week, and an article that came out last year. There's also a book that's forthcoming. In due course, we took that further to tackle the problem of reconstructing networks of communications across multiple collections and archives. And we joined with excellent colleagues from Oxford to form the AHRC-funded project Networking Archives, led by Howard Hotson, that began in 2018 and is still in progress. What's interesting about the process of doing data-driven and very collaborative research is that it draws you into new conversations and opportunities that might not emerge from solo authored work, because you bring something unique and complementary to a debate. Some great conversations emerged with other scholars thinking about why and how one can employ network analysis to humanities data and questions, which resulted in a short book that came out open access again last week. And that was a real pleasure to be drawn into. Now, another very important conversation that I got drawn into in 2017 was the one that would develop into the funding bid for Living with Machines. That conversation had originally begun as an idea of a mutually beneficial partnership between the British Library and the Alan Turing Institute. Not only was the Turing nestled inside the British Library, there was a complementary set of offerings from those two institutions. The British Library has digitised millions of pages from its collections, and the Alan Turing Institute is, of course, the National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence, and therefore offered the expertise to harness that data to answer research questions of scale. However, what the Turing didn't have a long track record with was doing history, is constructing history from cultural heritage data. And so entering into this collaboration was an experiment for all involved. The collaborative team that emerged developed a data-driven history project that contends that the untapped scale and depth of digital archives means that there remains much to learn about the human, social and cultural consequences of the coming of the machine age in the period circa 1780 to 1920. What we're aiming to do is to facilitate new historical findings about the effects of mechanization on the lives of ordinary people. We want to provide computational means of marshalling at scale the UK's growing number of digitized historical texts and documents. And we want to develop innovative computational models, tools, code and infrastructure that answers our research questions, but is also transferable to other research projects. But to achieve all of the above, we had to combine knowledge from the cultural heritage sector, from history and from data science. This is about doing history with machines. And in this case, it means humanities scholars in the team doing work in ways that in some cases is fairly alien to them. Similarly, some of our data scientists have never worked with humanities data with all its challenges and interest. But that challenge of facilitating this radical collaboration is one of the things that I'm most excited about on the project. So what are we working with? What are we doing? There's 23 of us. What can we achieve? Well, we want to answer questions about how ordinary people's lives changed as a result of industrialization, the changes in the workplace, the coming of rail and other infrastructural developments that supplied power and changed communication. But to do that, we need a whole range of different sources. A large proportion of our data sources come from already digitized resources held at the British Library, plus a small amount of digitization of their holdings that we're undertaking to harness opportunities we've identified or address gaps in the digital corpora with which we are working. Now, I don't have enough time to go into the details of all of the data with which we're working, but this slide should give a sense of the volume and complexity of the sources we're using. That includes textual data, such as the BL's newspaper holdings, visual data, such as the National Library of Scotland's Ordnance Survey maps, and tabular data, such as the integrated census microdata deposited with the UK Data Service. So what are all these people doing with all these digitized sources? Well, there are a lot of things, and I'm going to talk you through some different categories of that work, but it's going to be very top line, and I hope to be able to go into it a little bit more in the questions. Beginning with the text. So working with text, one of the first things I want to share is a tool that was developed out of a task to identify additional newspaper runs in the BL's holdings that we wanted to digitize. We had a set of criteria developed by our co-I, John Lawrence, in consultation with the BL. On the research-led side, we were looking for titles published between 1780 and 1918 from industrial areas underrepresented in the existing digital archive. We preferred titles published weekly over daily and with longer publication runs, amongst other criteria. But there were also practical factors. As a time-limited project, it was obviously important that digitization be completed quickly enough for us to use. And at the British Library, newspapers are stored in hardbound volumes, but some newspapers have been microfilmed. So microfilming is where a copy has already been made on a kind of film reel, and it's much quicker to digitize off microfilm, and it avoids delays due to conservation, and it's also a bit cheaper. So we prioritize digitizing off microfilm. A small team comprising Olivia Vane, Kasra Hosseini, and Georgia Tolfo therefore developed this tool called Press Picker. Press Picker consists of 2 Jupyter notebooks. The first notebook does data filtering and processing, and the second notebook produces an interactive visualization, which you saw in the previous slide, and which is unpacked on this slide. And this is a powerful tool for overviewing the BL's newspaper holdings. You can identify titles where a majority of issues are available as good quality microfilm, the red lines here. You can see those with longer runs and name changes, so we see a name change here. And using this tool, John Lawrence made title selections that have now been digitized. We're exploring how Press Picker's potential can help newspaper metadata management internally at the BL and also be used for BL readers. We believe it may also be of interest to other libraries with significant newspaper holdings, and would like to make the code available for reuse and adaptation. Newspapers have also been the primary focus of how we've engaged the public in the research work on the project. We have recently launched our second tranche of crowdsourcing efforts via the Zooniverse platforms. The crowdsourcing work on the project has been led by BL's Mia Ridge, with support from Turing research engineers Kasra Hosseini and Sarah Gibson, amongst others. Our first task was to ask people to annotate a selection of articles about accidents in newspapers that involved a machine, and to identify whether they were a workplace accident or an accident involving a vehicle, or neither of the above. Our latest task, launched last week, is moving into understanding the language of machinery. The word machine was used to describe a whole host of things, from prams to engines to bathing machines, and metaphorical uses such as the machinery of Parliament. And this pair of tasks asks Zooniverse volunteers to do 2 things. First, we identify the word machine in context, as here and here. And then we ask them to identify which object it refers to, whether that be a train, a bicycle, sewing machine, or something else. And then we ask volunteers to classify the word. Is it about war and military? Is it figurative? Is it transport? Is it mechanical apparatus, or is it something else? The data resulting from these tasks will provide a training set from which we can develop computational language models, and it will therefore feed into some natural language processing research on the project that we are calling dictionary expansion work. This piece of work is developing unsupervised and supervised computational models that automatically define machine terms. These employ the Oxford English Dictionary and Thesaurus to automatically detect mentions of machines in text. Their first task was to obtain sentences and quotations related to the lemma machine and use these as training data. So far, the team, led by Barbara McGillivray and Casper Beelen, have retrieved 130,000 quotations for almost 17,000 different word senses, and are now pruning that data. They're currently working to determine which sentences are relevant, including whether to focus on mechanical objects and exclude figurative sentences. Now, a place in which that figurative sense of the word machine has become very important in the project is on a strand of language work that's explored a particular phenomenon we had observed, one that we might think of as the literary precursor to the concept of artificial intelligence. That is, human attributes, or what is known as animacy, being assigned to a machine. We found that typical language models for identifying animacy, which are trained on the target word, were very poor at detecting these instances of what we call atypical animacy. That is, an inanimate object, like a machine, being assigned animacy. The team, led by Mariona Cole Ardenuya and Daniel Wilson, developed an innovative method that was much more successful and that involved masking, so hiding machine-related words in a sentence, and asking the language model to predict the word. Now, our assumption was that if it predicts things such as girl, man, boy, woman, or prince, that this implies that the machine is being anthropomorphized. We developed this model on BL's Microsoft Books corpus of 18th and 19th century books. And the method outlined in the forthcoming paper, which you can see at the bottom of your screen, is going to be applied to develop historical outcomes, which we're going to be working on in the new year. And I'll come back to some of those applications shortly. Another key strand of work in the project is on maps. There are different parts to the maps work on the project. The volume of digitised maps that are now available is so large that scholars such as Lauren Tilton, Taylor Arnold, Thomas Smits and Melvin Weavers have advocated for what they call distant viewing and visual similarity searching. And we might think about this as kind of analogous to the kind of work that literary scholars call distant reading, where they've embraced computational text analysis of large book, pamphlet or born digital collections. In Living with Machines, our first and largest collection of maps data is the Ordnance Survey Sheets from the National Library of Scotland, which is one of the libraries leading the way in scanning maps and making them discoverable for a variety of users. We also work with British Library map collections. But to fully understand what kind and what volume of data we were working with, our colleague Olivia Vane is developing visualizations to scan the collections for missing data, anomalies, and in general give us a bird's eye view of these maps. And you can see some of this work on the screen here. In this slide, we have a visualization. The reddish overlay is simply a visual effect to make it easier to see the frontier of survey work. The red flashes in for a newly surveyed sheet and then slowly fades over the next 2 years. As it fades, you see the map sheet image beneath. This work therefore allows us to begin crafting narratives about the genesis of the national map of the UK over the 19th century. Understanding the contours and histories of collections is a really essential precursor to any computational workflow. Now, one of the key issues we seek to address is the temporality of series maps like the Ordnance Survey. What you see in the slide here is a theory of the chronological appearance of each sheet of the second edition of the OS maps at the 6 inch to 1 mile scale. Looking at the NLS Maps portal, you can browse these maps and select sheets to review based on their survey or their print date. However, there's another date hidden from users, and that's the date a particular sheet was revised. Revisions result in different states of the OS sheets, which can be just a year or a few decades difference from the original survey. So when we look at the seamless layer of second edition sheets here, these reflect a quite large span of time from 1888 until 1930. Our second challenge with the maps work has been how we can read these map sheets at scale when we have so many of them and notice past patterns across them. The maps team have developed a method for making new data derived from scanned maps that does not attempt to capture discrete map features. And this is work that's been led by Katie McDonough, Kazra Hosseini, and Daniel Van Strien, amongst others. Instead, they're using computer vision, and they produce geolocated data sets that classify tiles in a gridded map sheet. So what do I mean by this? So what we do is we take each of these map sheets and we grid them, as you can see in this image on the right of the screen. We tile them. And team members then develop a training set by annotating a sample of these tiles. In this case, we're saying, does the tile contain any rail infrastructure? Yes or no? Whether that be rail lines, stations, junctions. This then becomes the training set for the computer vision that then automatically classifies the rest of the remaining map tiles. In the fourth image on the bottom right, you can see the predictions the algorithm makes, and it does indeed look like a rail network in a more pixelated form. In the workflow shown here, we are testing questions about the arrival of rail in the British landscape. Beyond the simple tracking of railways as lines and stations as nodes, we seek to explore the immediate visual context of the rail space. And the next step is to link that to external data, as you see in the fifth image on the slide. So rather than creating vector data for all rail lines and other infrastructure on over 50,000 map sheets, this tiling and label prediction method requires only a few thousand human annotations for training data. So a project that might have taken years and years can now happen in less than a week. In the UK, this is significant because railway track vector data has been released only as snapshots for certain years, 1851, 61, 81. Our method allows for new information about the rail landscape from other years to be collected. So what can we do with that? This research is driven by a desire to know more about the landscape that rail created in tandem with other industrial activity. To generate some data about that landscape, we needed more than just vector data of tracks and stations. These elements have long been coveted by economic historians, but rail affected much more than just those two kinds of structures. So how can we capture the way that the arrival of rail in communities fundamentally reshaped English, Welsh and Scottish communities? One thing we're interested to do is to be able to automatically compare abstract spatial relationships across the whole of Great Britain. For example, a classic 1969 study by John Kellett on the impact of rail on cities observed a shape he called the wedge, where rail lines were driven through an area in a kind of parallel but converging shape, which created a negative impact on the area between those lines. One such example is actually the Somerstown area near the British Library. Now, our contention is that we could say, computer, find me all the wedges. Now find me who lives there. However, the linking of data to retrieve that information, say from census or from trade directories, relies on another central piece of work in the project. So one of our key aims in the project is to develop ways of linking data through toponyms to tell rich and multi-layered histories of the impact of industrialization on given locales. The starting point for this linking work is a gazetteer that was developed on the project using Wikidata as its backbone. This is now in the process of being enriched with topographical dictionaries accessed from the British History Online and a dataset known as GB 1900. That is this crowdsourced text labels from the second edition County Series 6" to 1 mile OS map. So we have all those text labels that tell us about the places within those maps, which are also geolocated. Our aim is to further enrich this gazetteer and link it to some of the long list of sources I presented to you earlier, including maps, census data, and newspapers. However, one of the technical challenges of matching toponyms, both within and across datasets, is the high degree of historic toponym variation, regional or diachronic spelling variation, and also the bane of all of our lives, bad OCR. So how can we make sure that we're retrieving the correct place name when we have over 800,000 Wikidata place names? Our experiments showed that pure string matching was not adequate. If you look at the variants of the place name Ashton_Lyne on the left-hand side of the screen, which were all extracted from the FMP articles referring to Ashton_Lyne, pure string matching was only able to link the red and orange versions of the name. To address this problem, the team developed a method called DZ-Match, a flexible, deep neural network to fuzzy string matching, which was much more effective and also had a much reduced computation cost. And this work, detailed at the bottom of the screen, has been accepted at the 6th Spatial Conference, and so there'll be more on that soon. On that basis, we're going to be experimenting in linking toponyms found in other context-rich sources, such as the British History Online topographical dictionaries and directories such as the newspaper press directories and trade directories. This is a great first step because these sources have lots of contextual information that helps us with disambiguation of place names that occur multiple times across Great Britain. Difficult place names such as Newtown, which we know are in almost all towns. We look forward to sharing our outcomes of these experiments and our progress in tackling other data types like maps, census, and unstructured text like newspapers. However, being able to make progress on a project in the context of pandemic is not a given. When Mahendra invited me to speak at the symposium today, he also asked me to step back and talk about the experience of doing a project like this in 2020. The work I've been presenting today was largely begun pre-pandemic, when we were working side by side and we could gather around a single screen to explore a given challenge. All being inside the BL, because the Turing offices are inside the British Library, was a very important way, to the way that we worked collaboratively on the project. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were building off that for a while, and the sense of community and shared understanding that had already been created. But that only goes so far. We have had to welcome 3 new people to the team entirely remotely. And the first time we did that, we realized that we did not have as much documentation to explain our processes as we thought we did, because we'd been relying so much on those in-person interactions and shared experience. And so we've been trying to get much better at that. We've also had to adapt the way we work. Like the rest of you, the main result is that instead of sitting around communal tables looking at each other's screens, we're now in meeting rooms that are in Zoom. One example of how that really slows down collaborative work was perhaps felt most starkly in a session around maps and visualization run by Olivia, where we spent ages grappling with how to sketch out something together through Google Slides that would have taken a fraction of the time with pen and paper. That need to currently reinvent, adapt, and come up with new ways of doing things that we had perfectly good models for in the old world comes at a huge overhead in terms of time and energy. So many things on the project, intellectual, personal, and organizational, that in the past would have been dealt with over a quick coffee, now need scheduling, and Zoom fatigue is very real. But there are other aspects of our work that have evolved as a result of events in 2020. The atypical animacy work was begun before the pandemic, but it's also, the process has helped us recognize that there were actually two related tropes at play in the sentences that the model was helping us identify. The first, of course, was machines that are attributed with human-like characteristics, those sort of precursors to artificial intelligence. The second, however, was in some ways what we might think of as an inversion of the first, where humans are described as being like machines and thereby negating their humanness. This experiment shows us how language models can hint at social bias embedded in 19th century discourse. While man remains the most predicted token, replacing those masked and those hidden words machine, and woman wasn't far behind, the appearance of words like savage, slave, and slaves in context of negated humanness reflects the 19th century tendency to use these words in discourses that confer diminished human qualities on those people. And these findings, of course, take on an added urgency in the context of the Black Lives Matter protests following the murder of George Floyd. Our team are not scholars of colonial history, but we are keen to use this language model to think about how slavery is part of the machinery of commerce, how mechanization was connected with abolitionism in the mind of the British public, and how we can develop methods for better interrogating how this infiltrated the very fabric of language and literary imagination in the era. Another dimension of the work we have been doing since the beginning of the project also offers something to the calls to interrogate the biases at the heart of national libraries and archives. We have a particular task in mind, but we are keen to see how this might be adapted for such important work. What we sought to determine in the project was how representative the digitized newspaper corpora we have access to are of the actual 19th century newspapers as a whole. For a sense of why we need to do this, the British newspaper archive that the BL hosts and that was created in collaboration with Find My Past has now digitized over 40 million pages of newspapers from the BL and from some third parties. However, this is only a little under 9% of the entire newspapers held by the British Library, which in turn is not all the newspapers that existed in the period. How can we judge this representativeness? So what we did is we sought to find a proxy for the universe of 19th century newspapers by creating a data set from the newspaper press directories, and an image of that is in the bottom right of your screens. So the press directories were publications in which newspapers advertised their titles, which that advertising provided good motivation for inclusion. We had these scanned and OCR'd, and then Caspar Bielen worked on how to extract the rich contextual information about each newspaper that you see highlighted in the different colours in the image, wrestling with bad OCR using transfer learning. Now, thanks to that work, we now have information about each newspaper that existed, which we can match the titles from the digitized corpus against. But in addition, we also have great enriched metadata for those newspapers, which tell us about the day and frequency of each publication, its price, its self-declared political leaning, where it circulated, whose interest it promoted, and the name of the publisher, amongst other things, highlighted in different colours here. So how does this help us? We can now quickly analyse a newspaper corpus here on our screen, the JISC newspapers, to see where, for example, we have an overrepresentation of conservative or liberal newspapers. We can use that extra metadata to understand how the outcomes of our analysis are shaped and biased. For example, we might be able to say that descriptions of industrial accidents are more graphic in northern industrial towns or in liberal newspapers or in those owned by a specific set of publishers. Another use in the case of the BNA is that we could use it to make recommendations to FMP and the BL about where they might want to adjust their planned digitisation to make the digital archive more representative. We can do this across other categories: geographical location, working class interests, etc. More broadly, though, you can also begin to see how this approach might be adapted for thinking about other collections if we can first identify a suitable contextual data set to tell us who and what our collections should be representing. We would love to speak to other projects and libraries about how this idea of the environmental scan could be adapted for interrogating the biases created by collection policies of the past, and how those might be addressed to make our collections more representative of our nation's history and our society today. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you to my team for letting me share our work on their behalf. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for that. And we actually do have some questions, so I'm going to ask the first one. This is from someone that you may know. This is Andrew Prescott. And Andrew asks, interesting discussion by Ruth about animacy. Will the project be investigating the reverse phenomenon where people become described as machines? This occurs, for example, in Wordsworth, and it would be interesting to know how widespread this kind of discourse was.
Thanks, Andrew. That's a really great question, and I hope the bit towards the end of the presentation answered that. So yes, absolutely, and I think that's where it gets really, really interesting. That kind of dehumanization of people. So we now have the method to do that, so that we can start extracting those sentences and seeing how prevalent that motif is. And there's going to be some historical outputs based on that data that we're working on from March onwards.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question from my colleague Rositza. Living with Machines is undertaking impressive research involving the British Library's digitised collections. What have been the biggest challenges working with digitised archives, and how can cultural heritage institutions better support such radical collaborations in the future?
That's a... There've been lots of challenges, not good and bad, of course. I think one of the difficulties is actually around copyright law and sort of ambiguities around that. So we have the data, the text and data mining copyright exception, but it's actually quite a vague piece of law that works in favour if you want to interpret it in some ways, and perhaps you should be cautious in others. So we've had to be cautious around things like thinking about what our copyright cutoff date is, and the BL very sensibly has a more conservative copyright cutoff date of currently 1879, I think, for newspapers, because of the fact that you don't actually know who the author of individual pieces are. And so, yeah, the sort of legal context in the UK presents some real problems. And then realistically speaking, national institutions like the British Library and the National Archives and others are not richly funded, and they can't just do all the digitizations themselves. And so they have partnered with private companies. And so that creates an extra boundary for getting at data. It's not just easily downloadable data sets. We have to enter into legal negotiations with companies. And FIMO Past have been absolutely wonderful to work with, and they have provided us with data, but it's not an open data set. So we are not in a position to do reproducible data with those kinds of data sets in the way that we might be, for example, with the OS maps, where it is an open data set produced by the National Library of Scotland. So there are challenges in the UK cultural data landscape that we have to think about really carefully. And so we hope that we can make some recommendations from that experience about how to do this more seamlessly next time, or to make that process a bit easier for others. Hope that's okay.
Thank you. Ruth. Next question is from Mel Evans. Can you offer some examples of best practice in terms of working in such a large interdisciplinary team, please? Both in the old brackets real world and the new. Thank you.
We've tried lots of different things. So I think some of us had collaborated before, some people hadn't collaborated before at all, and none of us had really collaborated in a project of this size. So we did various things to try and set the ground to create shared understanding. And some of the things that have worked well is co-writing a project charter, which I think set out some of our expectations for people coming onto the project. And then we rewrote it again when the team was in place, with all the team contributing to it, to say, what were our values as a group. And so I think that's been helpful. I think you do need to go back to those documents, and we're at the point, having lived through pandemic, that we now need to go back and refresh it and say, does this charter work for us in an entirely virtual context? How would we need to rewrite it? Another thing that we did was starting our research with small exploratory labs. They don't exist in the project anymore, but when we started, we had like a time and space lab and a language lab. And the idea was, in the first few months, we would do very exploratory work in those slightly smaller groups around themed topics to try and generate outcomes. And those have generated the kind of bigger projects that we've pursued on the project. So that's where the atypical animacy idea came from. So that came out of one of those labs, and that was a great experience. And one of the things that I like best is that we had a reading group. This may seem like a really boring thing, but it's actually been really transformative. That, you know, every couple of weeks we would sit down with a text together, and sometimes that was a history text, and sometimes it's a digital humanities piece, but all of the different people on the project would read it together. And a data scientist often approaches a history article really different from how a historian approaches it, and so we use that to generate hypotheses for experiments on the project, and that's been really fun, and we're still doing that.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. So we have about 3 minutes left, and we have 3 questions. So I'm going to say them quickly. So this is from Andrew Hobbs. Apologies if you dealt with this in your discussion of COVID, but do you feel such collaborative projects are possible without meeting in the same room at all stages, planning, startup, team building, doing the work, sharing results, etc.?
I don't know if it would have been as easy to start the project if it had been all on Zoom. I don't know if we'd have got that sense of real trust in one another and had chance for those sitting down with a coffee and really talking through a problem. So I think launching a project would be much harder. I think we've really capitalized on the fact that there was good faith. But what has worked nicely is the fact that we did have a team spread across the UK. So John Lawrence is in Exeter, Emma's in Norwich, I'm in Cambridge, other people are elsewhere. And when we were joining remotely in the past, we felt very out of the conversations. But now everyone's on the same foot, that actually it's equalized things for those remote members of the team. So that's been a weird benefit, in fact.
Okay, so we've got 2 minutes, 2 questions. So this is from Javier Pereda. He says, I believe copyright was one of the main challenges behind the development of the Europeana Research Repository. How relevant is the commitment towards open linked data approaches? Should this become a national priority somehow? It is, at least for government data, brackets, e.g. 5 stars for open linked data.
I mean, that's really complex. And I know Melissa Terrace has got a new PhD student working on copyright law in light of Brexit and stuff. So it's a huge topic and needs that PhD. But I think I would just say that what we're pursuing in the project is, when we're making decisions about creating our linked data sets, is thinking about what's the most prescriptive and restrictive piece of data in those linked data, and what would that stop us doing. So we have to think really carefully about what we want to do based on what we would be able to release. So it's a bind, and it's something that needs us to lobby the government and funding councils about.
Thank you. And then the final question, and this is from James Heald. The Tudor Network's website doesn't appear to expose any URLs or identifiers for individuals or places, or for places that could be referenced or linked to. Was this a deliberate decision to cut the resource off from the linked data universe and make it unlinkable on a person by person or place by place basis? Will any of your future databases be more linkable?
This is just an interactive visualization. The actual underlying data set is going to be released with the book, so it'll be coming out hopefully next year. And each person has a unique identifier. Each document has a unique identifier. Each place has a unique identifier. And we're actually working, and they're linked to other URIs where they exist. So that does exist. The interactive visualization we had to make some pragmatic decisions to make it run. So yeah, the underlying data is going to be made available.
Okay, that's perfect timing, Ruth. I'm hoping there are some virtual applause in the background, and if there is a way for people to show their appreciation for Ruth's excellent keynote, please do that. As I was just hosting the Q&A, it's actually my turn next, so I'm going to introduce myself. But thank you very much, Ruth, and I'll now take over. Let's just... Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Mahendra Mahay, and I'm the manager of British Library Labs. I actually came to the British Library to set up the lab, and in essence what we were trying to do was to try to set up a place where people could experiment with the library's digital collections and data. Just check something's happening in the chat. Okay, that's fine. And really just sort of a quick summary. I'm going to give you a sort of an update over 2020 in terms of the things that we've been doing. So up until now, we've supported and showcased over 300 projects with a very small team working with researchers, artists, entrepreneurs, educators, and British Library staff and community activists. We've done this largely through competitions, awards, and projects, and lots of conversations, and we miss the face-to-face ones particularly. And we're moving and positioning ourselves more around getting our data and digital collections used within educational context and also within data science. And we're continuing to build a global community of galleries, libraries, archives, and museums or GLAM labs. And I'm going to talk briefly about some of the work we've done there. By the way, that's my email address at the bottom if you want to contact me about future lab stuff. So first of all, for some of you that are new to this community, I thought it would be good to actually define what a digital gallery, library, archive, or museum GLAM lab is. And we would define it as a space or mindset in a GLAM to experiment and innovate either online or on-site with that organization's digitized and or born digital collections and data. The really important thing is, and the big lesson I've learned over 8 years, it's not really about the people. I'm sorry, it's actually about the people, sorry. It's not about the technology. This is being recorded, so that bit can be edited later. It really needs people to run it. And we've created this term called a labber, and it's got some traction with many of my colleagues. And we define labbers are the people who actually run these labs and also the people that we want to get to use them. And these are some of the characteristics which we would define a labber, and that they're open to experimentation. So they like to try new things out. They like to take risks. They like to overcome barriers, and sometimes those are institutional. And Ruth mentioned some of those in her presentation. We've also developed this term from my colleague, Sophie at the Austrian National Library. We call it formalized disobedience, which is really questioning the way things have been done. We often, through our work, try to sort of establish change in the organization. So we often are at the forefront of sort of digital transformation. And for us to be really effective, we need to be trusted and given some agency. And really, when I give this talk, I always ask people to seek their inner labor. It's in there somewhere. It's probably hiding. But if you seek it, magical things can happen. And I'll talk a bit about magic in a minute. So what we're really trying to do in our lab is trying to connect our audience with our digital collections. That's in essence what we are trying to do. And that's really challenging, given that the British Library has an enormously vast collection of physical items. The numbers vary, but let's take a figure of 180 million physical things. And actually in the British Library, only 9% of those are books. So if we focus on the digital, that's about 4% of our physical collections. And this creates lots of challenges because people often ask us for things in digital form that we don't have. And really, in the lab, this is where we try to work. It's the sweet spot where we try to connect the collections, digital collection that we have with our audience. And this sounds easy, but it's actually deceptively difficult. It requires hard intellectual engagement. Sometimes it requires hard intellectual engagement sometimes. And this is often because of the smaller size and the random nature of some of our digital collections when compared to the digital collections. And obviously we're talking to people, and this creates lots of challenges. And I wanted to sort of just get this quote to all of you if you haven't heard of it before. It's adapted from the interview with the sociobiologist Edward Osborne Wilson in 2009. And it really encapsulates really some of the challenges we face when working with people and technology. And he said that human beings have Paleolithic emotions. Some of us work in medieval institutions, and yet we've been given this godlike technology. And this is the kind of space that we work. And I often say it's about connecting with people and then technology second. And connecting with people is hard. And that's been a lot of my experience over the last 8 years. So now sort of just talk about some of the updates that we've had. And last year, when we had the lab symposium, some of these changes were already happening. But Adam Farquhar, the head of digital scholarship and the PI for BL Labs, left and took early retirement in September 2019. Eleanor Cooper, who was the project officer, left BL Labs through a promotion to become the international engagement manager. I hope she's listening and watching today. Felipe Bento joined BL Labs as a technical lead in September 2019. And Maya Maricevic, head of higher education and science, started working in the BL Labs team, and we work on a sort of daily basis with her. So in terms of the day-to-day workings, it's 2 full-time staff. That's me and Felipe, and we work with Maya sort of in a sort of management and strategic capacity. Also, we've been sort of busy working on sort of the BL Labs community that we've helped set up. And this has been really interesting because we've seen that BL Labs around the world have been expanding, and they continue to grow. So if you're interested in the BL Labs community, please visit that website. That's glamlabs.io. Some of you may remember last year we wrote a book together. We have this philosophy as labbers, we call it eating your own dog food or practicing what you preach. So if we're encouraging people to experiment, we actually have to do it ourselves. So we wrote a book last year called Open a Glam Lab, and we did it in a very slightly frightening way. 16 of us were locked in a hotel for a week, and we couldn't leave until we'd written the book. And the book now has been translated since last year into Spanish and Bulgarian, and we've had lots of engagement and comments about how people have found it useful. And there's just some information about it. We even included a recipe for some fun, but it includes lots of practical advice if you want to set up your own lab or want to engage with a lab. So in terms of more about an update, just to sort of state, put a flag in the ground, BL Labs, we believe, was the first national library in the world to have such a digital innovation lab for its digital collections. We're funded until the end of March 2021, and we're working on getting that extended. We're also looking at developing a physical space for experimentation and incubation. We've been doing lots of experiments, and just before COVID, we were trying to get Jupyter Notebooks to provide computational access to our on-site only available collections for our readers, and we almost did it. But now that's kind of had to take a sort of back seat with everything else that's been going on in the world. But hopefully we'll have that implemented soon. And just sort of on a personal note, we struggled, I think, like everyone else did. And it was really, really hard on a sort of personal note. But I think now we're pretty much doing everything remotely, but we desperately miss the face-to-face human contact, and particularly the roadshows. There's lots of facts and figures there. I'm not going to go through all of them now, just looking at the time. I think probably the most interesting thing from that list is that I did 3 comedy stand-ups about some of the work that I do. But there's lots of other facts and figures if you're interested. So in terms of future work, we've been looking at revamping the data.bl.uk site, since a lot of our data has now moved to an open access repository. And we opened up the digital research spaces in the social sciences reading room. This was pre-COVID, and we even had an artist from Milan who was actually setting up her residency in this small glass covered space. And unfortunately that's had to sort of we've had to hold on that, but we can't wait to get back and carry on working with her. I mentioned the work that we've been doing on giving access to our readers through giving computational access to our readers through Jupyter Notebooks. And the engagement that we're continuing to do is carrying on. Obviously, a lot of it's now virtual. I mentioned earlier, we're doing a lot more work working with higher education, getting our courses and getting our data embedded into courses. And we've done some work with universities that run data science. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been continuing to work on the GLAM Labs community with a particular focus on anti-racism. And we're hoping to sort of consolidate the work that we're doing so we can carry on in future years. And I mentioned magic at the beginning of my presentation. I want to finish with this, and it's really probably a bit of a call to action, and really just for people to kind of realize that actually GLAM Labs can create magic, but the secret sauce behind it, I'm going to now reveal after 8 years. So you'll be glad to know. These are the things that I think are really important. I think it's really important to learn from yourself and each other, but also have the courage to fail fast and better, and continually doubt and question. The nature of a lab is experimental, so it's important to take risks. And it's, for us, the philosophy of being open, sharing, and actually it's a lot of hard work. Talking to people, trying to get them to connect with our collections is really hard. It's important to be kind and have respect for people's ideas. There are no stupid questions, and also to sort of facilitate independent thinking. So I'm going to just finish there with my update, and I'm going to stop sharing. And I think we can finish there. And we're now going to go on to a coffee break. And if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we can answer them later. Thank you very much. I don't think we've got time for questions. We're already going to the coffee break.
Hi, my name is Gustavo Candela, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Research Libraries team at the University of Alicante. The British Library Labs has inspired us to apply collecting as data as well as the GLAM Labs community. We propose a methodology to create collecting as data that is applied to several use cases, including the British Library. This work has been published in 2 articles and presented in 6 conferences. Would you like to try our notebooks? It's so easy. Just go to this address and click the binder link. Thank you and have fun.
Hello, my name is Dr. Terhi Nurmekafola and I am from the Australian National University. My competition entry is my opportunity to showcase some of the amazing digital projects made by my students over a 12-week course with the explicit aim of opening up the British Library's collection internationally and online. Examples of these projects include a VR environment of a Russian concert hall, an augmented reality treasure hunt app, and a choose-your-own-adventure rendering of a medieval manuscript.
In 2014, the library released 50,000 images of maps onto the georeferencer, extracted from millions of images available open access on Flickr from 17th to 19th century books. I am delighted to say that the collection has been completed and much of the coordinate data added to our catalogue, offering a really innovative metadata perspective. This isn't about me. I'm proud to represent our georeferencer community. A massive thank you to them.
Faint Signals is an artwork entirely drawn from the British Library's extensive nature recording archives. It's a procedurally generated forest that's different for every user that loads it with over 3 million variations. We wanted to create a meditative experience that really required people to slow down and spend time listening in this imagined woodland. The world itself is nondescript in terms of timelines. It exists somewhere between before humankind and potentially after us.
Web archives are vital sources for historical research, but they're huge. How can we help researchers use them and understand them? We've created a collection of Jupyter notebooks within the GLAM workbench. There's tools, code, apps, examples, documentation, many ways for researchers to get started. Run them live in the cloud and explore the amazing possibilities of web archives.
My name is John O'Rourke, and I'm an undergraduate at the University of Texas at Austin, studying history and geography. Research in 19th century Mexican sources and GIS-based approaches underpin the creation of an interactive web map that enables users to spatially explore the British Library's recently digitized Libros de Hijuelas collection. The interactive web map shows 228 communities in the Mexican state of Michoacan that participated in the liberal privatization of corporate indigenous landholdings during the late 19th and 20th centuries, officially known as Reparto de Tierra.
Hi, my name is Roslyn and I'm a self-taught surface pattern designer. In retaliation to all the racism and negativity towards Black people, I felt moved to produce some work that projects positivity, is joyous and instills pride for me, my family and the wider community. With the use of the British Library digital images, I was able to realise my ideas and create a collection of products that bring jubilation and self-esteem to the fore. Cheers, and thank you for watching.
That shouldn't be there. It wasn't my mind saying I don't want to be Indian, because I've always been proud of who I am. I have a strong sense of identity, but to me, it wasn't important at the time.
I have crossed an ocean. I have lost my tongue. From the root of the old one, a new one has sprung.
In the Spotlight is a crowdsourcing project where online volunteers work with the collections of the British Library. The complex design of these playbills means they're hard for computers to read, so the project asks the public to help transcribe some of the text. Thousands of people from all around the world have helped complete nearly 250,000 tasks. But it's the comments and discussion that make this community so special. I often tweet these comments so that others can share the hidden delights of this important collection, We've had some great discussions on the project forum and on social media. The generosity of this community in sharing their time, curiosity and knowledge is a truly wonderful thing.
Slowly kisses passing by the river.
Hi, my name is Gustavo Candela, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Research Libraries team at the University of Alicante. The British Library Labs has inspired us to apply collecting as data as well as the GLAM Labs community. We propose a methodology to create collecting as data that is applied to several use cases, including the British Library. This work has been published in 2 articles and presented in 6 conferences. Would you like to try our notebooks? It's so easy. Just go to this address and click the binder link. Thank you and have fun.
Hello, my name is Dr. Terhi Nurmekkapola and I am from the Australian National University. My competition entry is my opportunity to showcase some of the amazing digital projects made by my students over a 12-week course with the explicit aim of opening up the British Library's collection internationally and online. Examples of these projects include a VR environment of a Russian concert hall, an augmented reality treasure hunt app, and a choose your own adventure rendering of a medieval manuscript.
In 2014, the library released 50,000 images of maps onto the georeferencer, extracted from millions of images available open access on Flickr from 17th to 19th century books. I am delighted to say that the collection has been completed and much of the coordinate data added to our catalogue, offering a really innovative metadata perspective. This isn't about me. I'm proud to represent our georeferencer community. A massive thank you to them.
Faint Signals is an artwork entirely drawn from the British Library's extensive nature recording archives. It's a procedurally generated forest that's different for every user that loads it with over 3 million variations. We wanted to create a meditative experience that really required people to slow down and spend time listening in this imagined woodland. The world itself is nondescript in terms of timelines. It exists somewhere between before humankind and potentially after us.
Web archives are vital sources for historical research. But they're huge. How can we help researchers use them and understand them? We've created a collection of Jupyter notebooks within the GLAM workbench. There's tools, code, apps, examples, documentation, many ways for researchers to get started. run them live in the cloud, and explore the amazing possibilities of web archives.
My name is John O'Rourke, and I'm an undergraduate at the University of Texas at Austin, studying history and geography. Research in 19th century Mexican sources and GIS-based approaches underpin the creation of an interactive web map that enables users to spatially explore the British Library's recently digitized Libros de Hijuelas collection. The interactive web map shows 228 communities in the Mexican state of Michoacan that participated in the liberal privatization of corporate indigenous land holdings during the late 19th and 20th centuries, officially known as Reparto de Tierra.
Hi, my name is Roslyn and I'm a self-taught surface pattern designer. In retaliation to all the racism and negativity towards Black people, I felt moved to produce some work that projects positivity, is joyous and instills pride for me, my family and the wider community. With the use of the British Library digital images, I was able to realise my ideas and create a collection of products that bring jubilation and self-esteem to the fore. Cheers, and thank you for watching.
That shouldn't be there. It wasn't my mind saying I don't want to be Indian, because I've always been proud of who I am. I have a strong sense of identity, but to me, it wasn't important at the time.
I have crossed an ocean. I have lost.
Hello, welcome back everyone. I hope you had a nice break. I'm now going to introduce the first awards presentation, and I'd like to introduce my colleague Naomi Billingsley, who's the Research Development Manager at the British Library, and she's going to talk about the Research Award and who won. Over to you, Naomi.
Thank you, Mahendra. I'm just going to share my screen. So hello everyone, thank you very much for having me. I'm Naomi Billingsley, I'm the Research Development Manager at the British Library, and I'm honoured to be presenting the BL Labs Research Award for 2020. This award recognises projects that have been carried out in the context of research activity which shows the development of new knowledge about the British Library's digital content, research methods or tools. This year we had 11 entries from around the world, ranging from a search interface developed for digitised books, a website that reconstructs the history of early circus, and work looking at the impact of doctoral research. We would like to thank everyone that entered the awards, and we were particularly impressed with the quality of the entries this year. All submissions are available on the BL Labs Digital Projects Archive. We're only able to highlight 4 shortlisted entries, which are also included in the list of 10 30-second videos on the YouTube video playlist shown above. It includes more information for you to learn about each entry, and you can vote for your favourite in the Menti link. The links to the videos and websites for entries will also be placed in the meeting chat. So now on to the shortlist and announcements about the winners. The first shortlisted project is The Unearthed Odyssey by Awate Suleiman. Awate was born in Saudi Arabia and is of Eritrean descent. He came to the UK as a small child living on a working class council estate in Camden. He researched our huge sound archives of 7 million recordings in late 2019, culminating in 2 performances, a conceptual Afrofuturist album using 19 samples from the archive, 3 comprehensive blog posts, and work with 3 youth groups to unpack the themes and content of his journey with the British Library's collections. It's important to note that this project also has a strong focus on anti-racist work. The next shortlisted entry is Asking Questions with Web Archives, Computational Tools for Historians. And this is an entry from Australia, the UK, the USA and New Zealand by Tim Sherratt, Andrew Jackson, Alex Osborne, Ben O'Brien and Olga Holovnia. 16 editable Jupyter notebooks were created to demonstrate how specific historical research questions can be explored. Jupyter notebooks allow data such as that from web archives to be interrogated and analysed in a browser-based programming environment without the need to install specialist software. Next is inspiring computationally driven research with the British Library's digital collections, a GLAM notebooks approach. And this submission is from Spain by Maria Dolores Saez, Gustavo Candela, Pilar Escobar, and Manuel Marco Such. The work enables cultural heritage institutions and all researchers, including those in digital humanities, to experiment computationally with collections as data through 15 Jupyter notebooks using data from 12 GLAM institutions. And the final shortlisted entry is Afrobits by Javier Pereda, Patricia Murrieta Flores, Nicholas Radburn, Lois South, and Christian Monaghan. And this is an interactive installation of mostly African music and the transatlantic slave trade. And this work has a strong anti-racist theme. So I am now delighted to announce that the runner-up for the Research Awards 2020 is The Unearthed Odyssey by Awate Suleiman. This submission was given unanimous praise by everyone on the judging panel, and we are simply blown away by his work. Please give your appreciation virtually, and we of course urge you to listen to the longer interview and performance when you can. And so on to the winner, which is Archiving Questions with Web Archives, Computational Tools for Historians. Congratulations to Tim Sherratt, Andrew Jackson, Alex Osborne, Ben O'Brien, and Olga Holovnia. The panel were impressed with the quality of documentation and thought that went into how to work computationally through Jupyter notebooks with web archives, which are challenging to work with because of their size. And these tools were some of the first of their kind. The Labs Advisory Board wanted to acknowledge and reward the incredible work of Tim Sherratt in particular. Tim, you have been a pioneer as a one-person lab over many years, and these 16 notebooks are a fine addition to your already extensive suite in your GLAM workbench. Your work has inspired so many in GLAMS, the humanities community, and BL Labs to develop their own notebooks. To our audience, we strongly recommend that you look at the GLAM workbench if you're interested in doing computational experiments with many institutions' data sources. Thank you again to all who submitted to the research category. We're going to finish this section with a 30-second video from the winning team about their entry.
Web archives are vital sources for historical research, but they're huge. How can we help researchers use them and understand them? We've created a collection of Jupyter notebooks within the GLAM workbench. There's tools, code, apps, examples, documentation, many ways for researchers to get started. Run them live in the cloud and explore the amazing possibilities of web archives.
Thank you for that, Naomi. And now I'm going to introduce my colleague, Adi Keenan-Schubert, who's going to give a brief update on the projects that have been going on in the digital research team within the Digital Scholarship Department at the British Library. Over to Adi.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mahendra. So hi everyone. I'm going to give you a brief update on our digital scholarship projects at the British Library. A little bit about the digital research team and our work, our mission is to enable the use of the library's digital collections for research, inspiration, creativity, and enjoyment. We promote the use of the library's digital collections and data and offer support for anyone interested in using them. We stay connected to the wider network of institutions and organizations and share knowledge, expertise, and experience across different communities of practice. Internally, we work towards improving processes to enable digital content to be accessible as possible. We run our digital scholarship training program to improve the digital skills of BL staff and raise awareness of new digital research opportunities. And we undertake innovative research projects, collaborations, using digital methods on our collections to showcase their potential and improve access for our users. One such project is this, Legacies of Catalog Descriptions and Curatorial Voice, Opportunities for Digital Scholarship. Rosita Tanasova from the team is involved with this one. It's a 12-month collaboration between the Sussex Humanities Lab, the British Library, and Yale University Library. It was funded under the AHRC UK-US Collaboration for Digital Scholarship in Cultural Institutions Partnership Development Grants Scheme. The project covers computational, critical, and curatorial analysis of collection catalogs, for example, examining free text descriptions of photographs in the BL collection. It combines corpus linguistic methods and archival research to characterize curatorial voice. And it develops sectoral capability in digital scholarship through co-produced training materials and workshops. The next event is actually it's a half-day training event taking place tomorrow, and you can see the project website for more information. Another project that you've heard about from Ruth Annert and that Mia Rich from the team is involved with is Living with Machines. I won't spend a lot of time on this because you've heard a lot about it from Ruth, but as she was saying, it's a collaboration between the Turing Institute, academics at UK universities, and the library. And this is something that was also mentioned by Ruth, that it launched its first crowdsourcing tasks in late 2019 and watched them being finished by volunteers in the first few weeks of lockdown, just a few months later. In order to help the project to discover stories about the industrial past, they asked contributors to identify accidents reported in 19th century newspapers, and this proved to be very popular. As the next step, the project is launching more language-related tasks, such as to read small sections of newspaper articles that talk about the machine and then identify what kind of machine was meant in each example. Mia Ridge, the project co-investigator, is also looking forward to celebrating 250,000 contributions to the BL's LibCrowds platform via the In the Spotlight project. She plans to bring both these experiences to the process of collaboratively writing a book in a fortnight on crowdsourcing and digital participation in cultural heritage through an AHRC-funded networking project called Collective Wisdom. Another area of work, OCR-HTR, which is optical character recognition, handwritten text recognition. I've been involved in working this area as well as my colleague Tom Derrick. Arabic and Bengali OCR-HTR datasets were made available on the BL repository last year. We delivered OCR-HTR training to BL staff, which was one-day course and a workshop on a tool called Transcribers. Tom Derrick from the 2 Centuries of Indian Print project used Transcribers to OCR an entire series of books using the Bangla trained model. So that was about 150 early Bengali books. He is now using Wikimedia Commons and Wikisource to present text of books alongside the scanned images. Tom plans on running a competition in partnership with the Bengali Wikisource community in spring 2021, encouraging volunteers to improve OCR of 2 Centuries of Indian Print books in Wikisource. The plan is also to make these transcriptions available as an open dataset and keyword searchable through the library viewer. An area of work which my colleague Stella Wisdom has been involved with is digital comics. Digital comics in the UK are at the cutting edge of how imaginative, immediate, and emotionally engaging stories can be told in the 21st century. New creative tools, new formats, and new methods of distribution have expanded the reach of ideas communicated through digital comics. On top of embracing technological change, digital comics have the potential to reflect, embrace, and contribute to social and cultural change in the UK. We welcome 2 new BL collaborative doctoral students who are researching different aspects relating to the creation, production, consumption, value, and collecting of UK digital comics. Linda Berube from City University of London, supervised by Ian Cook, and Thomas Gebhardt from the University of Arts, supervised by Stella Wisdom. We do internal training, and in the past year, we're also involved in external training too. In the past year, my colleague Nora McGregor coordinated an Institute of Coding funded trial at Birkbeck University of a new 1-year part-time master's level postgraduate certificate framework in computing aimed at information professionals working in the cultural heritage sector. From deploying simple scripts for everyday tasks to developing tools for analyzing collections data, the British Library and the National Archives explore different ways to meet demand for such skills arising particularly from colleagues in curatorial and collection-based roles. This trial explored a model whereby cultural heritage professionals would gain crucial computational skills immediately relevant to their roles while earning a formal qualification in computer science with expert support of their institution. A cohort of 20 staff members from the library and from the National Archives undertook 2 newly designed modules at Birkbeck University as part of the trial, and final module, Analytic Tools for Information Professionals, is currently under development and will be launched as part of the full Applied Data Science postgraduate certificate starting next month. This year, we kept running our usual digital scholarship training program, transitioning fully to online delivery. This is an internal training program aimed at enabling library staff to support and/or to undertake digital research. We run different types of events internally. You can see just a few examples on the slide. These include courses, hands-on workshops, talks, and a reading group. We had Deirdre Sullivan helping us run as many events as possible very smoothly. Training opportunities this year included areas such as library carpentry, Open Refine, machine learning and AI, OCR, HDR, emerging formats, and Wikimedia training. And I've just finished coordinating and delivering a course on digital mapping last week, which already encouraged several curators to embark on mini web mapping projects on their own. To give one focused example of training is our collaboration with Wikimedia UK. During 2020, Stella Wisdom ran a program of 4 online talks and 5 training sessions for BL staff to raise awareness and understanding of the Wikimedia family of platforms, including Wikisource and Wikidata. Looking ahead to 2021, we plan to host a new British Library Wikimedian in residence who will collaborate with library colleagues to increase engagement with the Wikimedia community. If you'd like to know more or if you're interested in collaborating, then please do get in touch or follow the developments via these channels. We would absolutely love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adi. That was wonderful. I know it's very difficult to sort of do that in 10 minutes because I know your team's done an enormous amount of work. So I'd like to thank Adi for her presentation. If we could thank her virtually, if that's possible. And then we're going to move on to the next award. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Jamie Andrews, who's the head of culture and learning, who's going to be announcing the artistic awards. Jamie, if you could switch on your camera and microphone, and I believe I'm controlling the slides.
Hi, Mahendra. I'm here. I hope that you can hear and see me. Yes, Mahendra says, my name's Jamie. I'm the lead at the library for our public programming and our learning and education work. And Mahendra tells me this is the third time that I presented the BL Labs Artistic Awards, which is a great pleasure. And goodness, it's always been an important award, but this year of all years, the idea of acknowledging and celebrating digital innovation feels never more vital. So I think I'd like to start by just thanking Mahendra and all of the BL Labs team for persevering and making sure that despite all the circumstances that we all understand the difficulty of, despite those difficult circumstances, they persevered and made this happen. So this award is the Artistic Award. It recognises an artistic or a creative endeavour that's used, that has used our content, the library's content, to inspire, to amaze and to provoke. We'd like to thank everyone who submitted works from around the world. The works have ranged from surrealist art to music videos to the visualization of space in cultural heritage institutions, drawings inspired by our sounds, our sound recordings, and even clever and innovative use of our illuminated manuscripts. If you weren't chosen to be in the shortlist, nonetheless, I know that the Labs team have been in touch with you about showcasing your work in other ways, and we really hope we can make that happen. Because of time, in the next 5 minutes, I won't be able to highlight all of the submitted pieces, but we are going to highlight the 4 shortlisted entries which have received recognition. And don't forget that while we're going to announce our winner, there is a People's Award as well, and you can choose your favourite to go on that shortlist. So as the slide is showing us, we're now going to move on to the winners, and starting with a special commendation. And the first entry for that special commendation is one that I think you'll have seen earlier. It was shortlisted in the research category, and it's called Afrobits, and hopefully the slide now will show us. There we are, that's Afrobits by Javier Pereda, Patricia Moreta Flores, Nicholas Ratburn, Lois South, and illustrated by Christian Monaghan. If you've heard about this already, if you were with us earlier, you'll know this is an interactive installation of African music and relating to the transatlantic slave trade. And so, of course, a piece that is absolutely vital for our times. So congratulations to the Afrobits team. And now I think we've got a 30-second promo video to give you a bit more of an idea about this commended piece.
Penny Lane is in my ear and in my eye. And until Penny Lane is in my ear and in my eye.
Brilliant. Well, I hope that gives you an appetite to find out more about that piece. And now on to our second special commendation of the awards this year. And that special commendation goes to Afro Hair and Its Heritage by Rosalind Henry. Rosalind is a self-taught surface pattern designer. Her work, as you can see there from the images, the work is a celebration of Black heritage through Black Afro hair, looking for and celebrating positive images. She used images for this piece of Bantu, Balando and Arkan men and women from the British Library's Flickr Commons collection. I'm sure you'll have heard all about those million free to use images. And she's used them to make patterns for fabrics and wallpapers and t-shirts and mugs, and has plans, certainly plans to use the fabrics to make other products as well in the future. And the panel loved the positivity, the creativity in this piece. The designs were vibrant and fresh and cool. And now let's hear more from Rosalind about her piece.
Hi, my name is Rosalind and I'm a self-taught surface pattern designer. In retaliation to all the racism and negativity towards Black people, I felt moved to produce some work that projects positivity, is joyous and instills pride for me, my family and the wider community. With the use of the British Library digital images, I was able to realise my ideas and create a collection of products that bring jubilation and self-esteem to the fore. Cheers, and thank you for watching.
Thank you, Rosalind. Joy and pride, two wonderful things that flow through that piece. Now we're on to the runner-up. The runner-up this year, 2020 Artistic Awards, is a piece called Faint Signals by the Invisible Flock team. I'm actually in Leeds at the moment, and Invisible Flock are from Leeds, so well done, Invisible Flock. Very pleased to see this. The team is Ben Eaton, Victoria Pratt, Klaus Koopnix, Catherine Baxendale, Amy Belderston, and Simon Fletcher. And this is a new and very recently launched, just in the last couple of weeks, in fact, a new online interactive artwork that algorithmically generates an imagined Yorkshire forest densely populated with sounds of nature that come from the British Library Sound Archive, from the Environmental Sounds collection in our archive. This entry went down very well with all the panel, wonderfully inventive use of our Environmental Sounds collection, a clever imaginative use of Unity 3D technology, a perfect impact over the COVID period. It's a piece that draws you in, that is relaxing and rather beguiling. And certainly in these COVID times when traveling is impossible, when perhaps traveling into nature is difficult, this gives you a sense of the glories and the vastness of the sounds of nature. And let's get a bit more of a taste of this fantastic work right now.
Faint Signals is an artwork entirely drawn from the British Library's extensive nature recording archives. It's a procedurally generated forest that's different for every user that loads it, with over 3 million variations. We wanted to create a meditative experience that really required people to slow down and spend time listening in this imagined woodland. The world itself is nondescript in terms of timelines. It exists somewhere between before humankind and potentially after us.
Congratulations to Invisible Flock. Do check that out. And now we've had wonderful entries. We've had some wonderful shortlisted entries, but there does have to be a winner. And in 2020, I'm delighted to announce that the winner of the Artistic Awards is The Unearthed Odyssey by Awati Suleiman. Chosen again in this category, in case you missed it earlier, Awati's research has culminated in 2 artistic performances at the library, a conceptual Afrofuturist album using samples again from our sound archive. There's been blog posts, there's been work with 3 different youth groups working through Awati's own journey at the British Library. The panel who judged this were incredibly moved by the performance of Awati, impressed by the quality of the storytelling and the research that stitched together such powerful archive footage that included everything, including Grace Nichols's poem, I've Crossed an Ocean, as well as other extraordinary recordings of extraordinary people. Congratulations to you, Awati, for your mastery in creating this captivating performance that I think gives all of us who experienced it goosebumps. I'm sure that you will all now be giving your appreciation to Awati virtually. In addition to expressing appreciation, do discover this piece. Do go and listen to it. It's moving, it's inspiring. Well done, Awati. We know that you are somewhere here online. And now you're going to introduce the piece to us, and we're going to see a 30-second clip of your performance, which is not long enough, but it will give us all a great sense of what you've done.
My name is Awate. I'm an independent musician and filmmaker from Camden via Eritrea, and I was the artist in residence at the British Library for Unlocking Our Sound Heritage in 2019 and 2020, where I did research, talking to curators, listened to lots of stuff in the archive, and produced an Afrofuturist concept album featuring the voices of young people from South London and stuff from the Sound Archive called The Unearthed Odyssey.
That shouldn't be there. It wasn't my mind saying I don't want to be Indian, because I've always been proud of who I am. I have a strong sense of identity, but to me, it wasn't important at the time.
I have crossed an ocean. I have lost my tongue. From the root of the old one, a new one has sprung.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for that. That was really moving. So now on to the next presentation. And this is going to be from my colleague, Rachel Kotarski, who's Head of Research and Infrastructure Service at the British Library. And she's going to give an update on what her team has been doing in the Research Services Department. Over to you, Rachel.
Hi everyone. How to follow that is not an easy task. I haven't got very long, so I'm going to whiz through as quickly as possible an update on what we've been doing at Research Services at the British Library. So first of all, who are Research Services? So we're a department at the British Library whose aim is to develop and improve the services that we provide for researchers, but also as individuals, but also research organisations. And we do take a very wide description of the term research. So we're not explicitly talking about academic researchers. We're not even explicitly talking about people who are paid to do research as part of their jobs. It's anyone who's looking to find and discover new information at the British Library, whether on site or online. And actually our focus within the Research Services Department is very much on those users and how to make it easier for them to do their task of research, not just with our collections, but potentially with other collections and sources of information and content globally. Across the department, there are several teams who have different kind of functions, I guess. I've listed a few of those in bullet points here. Because of the short amount of time I've got to cover a little bit of an update today, I'm only really going to cover in-depth content strategy and a little bit on the tools and infrastructure that we've been working on throughout 2020. So tools and infrastructure, as my job title suggests, is the area that my team in particular works on. But I'm going to start out looking at our content strategy. This is particularly timely because just a couple of weeks ago, we released our content strategy for contemporary published material. This is about what we are purchasing rather than what we collect as part of our legal deposit duty to collect everything published in the UK. But this content strategy for contemporary material is very much focused on the research tasks that we know our users have, with a dependency on providing remote access, for instance, to subscribed materials, and building that into a really holistic view of how we provide research services to our users via the British Library. The content strategy has been pulled together in full agreement of publishers, and there is a link there that has also been posted in the chat to a little blog post that introduces that content strategy with a little bit of background for people who aren't familiar with kind of collection practices of institutions like the British Library, and also links to the document in full. And obviously content is a big part of how we are supporting researchers, but it's not the only thing we do. Especially within 2020, the message very much from the British Library is that we have remained open. Even though our buildings may have been closed, as a library, we remain open for people to do research online and wherever it is they want to do their research, whether it is in an office or a home office, on the train, on a plane. So one of the things that we did early on in 2020 during the first lockdown period is provide webinars on highlighting the range of services that we do provide to people who are having to work from home. These weren't all necessarily targeted directly to researchers, to you all as individuals, but also to our colleagues from libraries and cultural institutions who may have found themselves in a position where they weren't able to carry out their normal duties, but actually were provided then with an opportunity to do a bit of additional learning and upskilling. And so some of those webinars are very much aimed at colleagues, telling them about how to support their own researchers in terms of open services. More recently, we had our annual Open and Engaged conference. There is a link there and also now in the chat to the recordings from Open and Engaged. And our focus very much this year was about equitable access to research, looking at the inequities that already exist in terms of access. And these are not just financial, but talking about people who have differing needs in terms of how they access material, which I think those of us who wouldn't have traditionally thought we had problems with accessibility to research may have actually uncovered that there were existing inequities that we hadn't previously thought about in the way that we carried out research. And so Open and Engaged very much explored those and looking at projects and pathways to improving access to research. As part of the early lockdown, we also made an explicit effort to highlight content that's available from the British Library offsite. So we have various legal and logistical issues that mean that not 100% of our collections, I would say barely 10% of our collections are actually available for you to be able to use offsite. But as you can see here, if you go to Explore the British Library, which is the main search tool that we provide for our collections, there is now a new tab that filters out every search so that we only provide you a list of results that you can access there and then, making it a lot easier for people to navigate and understand what we can provide them from home. One of the services that's always been available to people from home or office is Ethos. So this is our service providing a catalogue, an almost 100% coverage of all the theses that are from awarded doctoral research across the UK, pretty much throughout all time. So we have over 500,000 theses available on Ethos. We continue to see usage of that grow as well as coverage of the content. But I think for things like Ethos, it's important to understand that as well as providing a route to discovering doctoral research, the Ethos in itself is actually an important data set. So all the metadata that we have on awarded theses across the UK not only covers the range of research subjects covered in the UK, but also through the start of doctoral research in the UK. I think we have examples going back to the late 1700s all the way up to last week. And actually that provides us with a data set that helps us understand what researchers look like within the UK through time. And that's one of the reasons why we make that data set of metadata available on our shared research repository at iro.bl.uk. The British Library, as you will have seen through some of the examples today, is in itself a research organisation. Staff do research. And so in order to make that available and accessible more widely, we have put it on our shared research repository. The repository work we do in partnership with a few different organisations who are also cultural heritage organisations with a research remit. And the research repository has a shared search interface so that you can look for research provided by all 6 of the partner organisations in one place, or you can actually drill down to individual repositories and, for instance, only see research made available from Kew, for example. One of the things we've worked on this year is improving the use of persistent identifiers for items that are held within the repository. And I know that someone in the questions earlier, and Ruth answered the question around providing more persistent identifiers. That's something that British Library in particular are particularly interested in, which is why we've been involved in the EU-funded Freya project for the past 3 years. And what that has given us is the ability to input more persistent identifiers, not just for the outputs within the repository, but for the people who have created those outputs. So as researchers, we have ORCID identifiers associated with our research. And because we are the lead for the DataCite Consortium in the UK, so this is an organisation that works to support the use of digital object identifiers for the citation of data, to make data a first-class research object, we are actively today also asking everyone who finds data via the repository in future and uses it to please ensure that you cite it with those digital object identifiers. So within items within our repository, if you download a data set, you can also download a citation for Zotero, so you can cite it wherever you're reusing that data. And for those of you who think you might not be familiar with digital object identifiers, here's just an example of what one looks like. If you have read any digital research article within the past 10 years, you will have seen one of these. And I think the important point to note is you can see at the top here that our research repository is currently in beta. We will be continuing the work, but for instance, all the URLs to all the data sets on that page may well change in the next year, let alone in the next 10 years. And so if you use digital object identifiers to cite any data that you use in the British Library or our partner organisations, readers of your work in 10 years to come will still be able to access this data, even though our repository might have changed all its URLs. This data site work is led by our data services team, and some of you might already have been aware that we have a research data strategy document, which we are intending to update in 2021. We will be continuing activities as listed in the bullet points here, but I'm trying to move along quickly. Data creation and creating data from collections continues to be a big part of what we will do. We will continue to do that to support the amazing research that we've seen showcased here today. But I think with our user focus, we want to continue to learn from what we've seen today, what research you continue to want to do, so we can make sure that data creation is done in a way that, you know, continues to support your aims. In terms of future plans, one of the things we want to do is start to link a lot of these concepts together. So unifying discovery of content, both digital and physical, across the British Library, but also linking that to relevant contextual collections from other cultural organisations. We want to be able to provide programmatic interfaces to our data and metadata so that they can be reused in different tools and other people's search interfaces. One of the things that I'm currently working on is a project within a programme funded by AHRC called Towards a National Collection. We have a project that for short is called Heritage PIDS. You can follow the link to find out what the full name is. And we are looking at encouraging the use of persistent identifiers for collections and for metadata across our peer organisations in cultural heritage. And again, this kind of relates to the questions that you had for Ruth earlier about ensuring that we can link between people and places and objects as concepts to join up the information that we have across dispersed collections within the UK. And we hope to be able to build on that beyond next year as well. And in terms of programmatic interfaces, linking together information across collections, that is the kind of service that would potentially support future activities like a single digital presence for public libraries. So at the British Library, we're supporting our public library colleagues by working on an alpha version of a digital interface that could be shared across all public libraries to help them connect their content, celebrate that the work they do and the services they provide across the public library sector. And that's the kind of thing that potentially you could kind of plug in any programmatic interfaces from any library into that to support public library users to find research content as well as their traditional public library content. So if anyone would like more information on that, I think following the British Library's Living Knowledge blog will also be very helpful there. And that is my super quick fly through of a few bits and pieces we've been doing from research services.
So thank you very much, Rachel. And I hope all of you that are interested in research, that means all of you, have found Rachel's presentation interesting. And so in the interest of time and to try to catch up a little bit, we are running a little bit late, about 10 minutes or so. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Ria Bartlett, who's lead producer for on-site learning at the British Library. And she's going to introduce the BL Labs Learning and Teaching Award.
Brilliant, thank you, Mahendra. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, let's get the tech working first. Okay, brilliant. Yes, thank you, Mahendra. I'm also aware of time, so I will speed through. So yes, my name's Ria Bartlett. I work in the learning team at the British Library. And yeah, I think this is about my 4th year presenting. It's always a pleasure to be here. My first time to be here virtually. Thank you for having me. And a nice way to end the year as well with some celebration of some really innovative work. So thank you and well done, everyone. So this award recognises projects that have been created in a teaching or learning context using the library's digital content and or data which show how it has been or could be used to provide quality learning experiences to learners of all ages and abilities. I know that this is an area that BL Labs and also other gallery, library, archive and museum labs around the world are going to be focusing their energies on over the course of the next few years. So this year we had 8 entries in total in this category, amazingly from around the world, which is incredible. And they range from a board game to explore the library's collections through well-known stories. We also had students curating collections and putting that data back into our catalogue, as well as an interactive holographic interface to explore the library's 3D models. And you can find all of this information and more in the BL Labs digital project archive. So in this instance, or in this year, the awards panel, we were able to shortlist 4 of the submissions, and we decided to give them all awards because they were all fantastic. So our first special commendation goes to mapping the Reparto de Tierras in Michoacán, Mexico. And this was by John Erard. John is an undergraduate researcher from the University of Texas, Austin. So this project was underpinned by research in 19th century Mexican sources and geographic information systems based approaches to create an interactive web map for anyone to spatially explore the library's recently digitized Libros de Hijuelas collection, and this is from the Endangered Archives programme. We were particularly impressed by the quality of the tool produced by John, which he produced in his own time, and his generosity and kindness also to share this tool for the benefit of everyone. And also this is the first time, I think, ever that the EAP digitised collection has been recognised for a BL Labs award. So that's quite exciting too. We hope many more projects will be submitted in the future using the EAP's incredible range of digital collections. And now let's hear a bit more about this entry from John. And congratulations, since I know he's joining us this afternoon from Texas.
My name is John Erard, and I'm an undergraduate at the University of Texas at Austin, studying history and geography. Research in 19th century Mexican sources and GIS-based approaches underpin the creation of an interactive web map that enables users to spatially explore the British Library's recently digitized Libros de Hijuelas collection. The interactive web map shows 228 communities in the Mexican state of Michoacán that participated in the liberal privatization of corporate indigenous land holdings during the late 19th and 20th centuries, officially known as Reparto de Tierras.
Brilliant, congratulations, John. So our second special commendation goes to, and this is one I know we've heard from a few times this afternoon, which is brilliant. So this is The Unearthed Odyssey by Awate Suleiman. So we were particularly impressed by how Awate worked with school children to unpack his journey of research at the British Library to make this piece. It's one that's probably particularly close to my heart because Awate did work closely with my team, with the learning team during his residency at the library, and it was amazing to get the opportunity to work with him. So he also taught young people at the Roundhouse in Camden, as well as Fairbeats in Lewisham. And he recorded voices from children and young people to be included in his final piece, which was quite an amazing honour for them. So we particularly like the narrative that Awate created. So the story itself takes place on a generation ship. During the one day a year, a group of children are awake for a lesson taught to them by an artificial intelligence tutor. So the tutor uses an algorithm to sample the British Library archive from the years 1896 to 2019 in order to tell them stories of human migration using clips of oral history recordings. So as they are travelling to a different planet, the AI places them in a greater context of migration, exploring themes including war, corruption, famine and drought. Yeah, massively well done, Awate. I hope you're listening. And I urge everyone to listen to the Unearthed Odyssey. It's an outstanding performance, so well done. Okay, so moving on swiftly. So this is the announcement of our runner-up, which is inspiring computationally driven research with the British Library's digital collections, a GLAM notebooks approach. And this is from Spain, Maria Dolores Sayas, Gustavo Candela, Pilar Escobar, from the Department of Software and Computer Systems at the University of Alicante. So we were impressed that the notebooks the team have developed are being used in their own teaching. And they have generously, they've generously created them for other GLAMS data when many do not have the capacity to do so. So that was brilliant. So they've made 15 notebooks for 12 GLAMS, and we're going to hear briefly from Gustavo. But yes, well done to Manuel, Maria, Pilar, and Gustavo.
Hi, my name is Gustavo Candela, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Research Libraries team at the University of Alicante. The British Library Labs has inspired us to apply collecting as data as well as the GLAM Labs community. We propose a methodology to create collecting as data that is applied to several use cases, including the British Library. This work has been published in 2 articles and presented in 6 conferences. Would you like to try our notebooks? It's so easy. Just go to this address and click the binder link. Thank you and have fun.
Fantastic, and congratulations to the whole team. So finally, shall we have a drum roll for our winner for the Educational Award is Beyond the Rubric, collaborating with the cultural sector in higher education, teaching and research. And this is by Terry Nemiko Fuller. So well done to Terry, who I think is here. I think I've maybe seen her on the chat. And especially well done to her students who produced some outstanding work in only 12 weeks through their group projects. The panel felt this was a real kind of exemplary use of the library's digital collections and data in a digital scholarship context, and a template for further collaboration with BL Labs and other GLAM labs, working with educational institutions, especially in the area of digital humanities. We were particularly impressed by Terry's grading criteria that recognised ambition in projects, and her decision to have interdisciplinary, gender-balanced, multilingual groups. So that's all from me. Thank you very much, and congratulations to all the winners. And just before I go, I will pass over to Terry, who's going to tell you a bit more about the project. Congratulations.
Hello, my name is Dr. and I am from the Australian National University. My competition entry is showcases some of the amazing digital projects made by my students over a 12-week course with the explicit aim of opening up the British libraries internationally and online. Examples of these projects include a VR environment of a Russian concert hall, an augmented reality treasure hunt app, and a choose-your-own-adventure rendering of a medieval manuscript.
Okay, thank you very much, Ria. That was fantastic. We're now going to break for coffee, and it's now 16:03. So we've decided to have a 10-minute coffee break, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you very much for being here so far.
Hi, my name is Gustavo Candela, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Research Libraries team at the University of Alicante. The British Library Labs has inspired us to apply collecting as data as well as the GLAM Labs community. We propose a methodology to create collecting as data that is applied to several use cases, including the British Library. This work has been published in 2 articles and presented in 6 conferences. Would you like to try our notebooks? It's so easy. Just go to this address and click the binder link. Thank you and have fun.
Hello, my name is Dr. Terhi Nurmekkapola and I am from the Australian National University. My competition entry is my opportunity to showcase some of the amazing digital projects made by my students over a 12-week course with the explicit aim of opening up the British Library's collection internationally and online. Examples of these projects include a VR environment of a Russian concert hall, an augmented reality treasure hunt app, and a choose your own adventure rendering of a medieval manuscript.
In 2014, the library released 50,000 images of maps onto the georeferencer, extracted from millions of images available open access on Flickr from 17th to 19th century books. I am delighted to say that the collection has been completed and much of the coordinate data added to our catalogue, offering a really innovative metadata perspective. This isn't about me. I'm proud to represent our georeferencer community. A massive thank you to them.
Faint Signals is an artwork entirely drawn from the British Library's extensive nature recording archives. It's a procedurally generated forest that's different for every user that loads it with over 3 million variations. We wanted to create a meditative experience that really required people to slow down and spend time listening in this imagined woodland. The world itself is nondescript in terms of timelines. It exists somewhere between before humankind and potentially after us.
Web archives are vital sources for historical research, but they're huge. How can we help researchers use them and understand them? We've created a collection of Jupyter notebooks within the GLAM workbench. There's tools, code, apps, examples, documentation, many ways for researchers to get started. Run them live in the cloud and explore the amazing possibilities of web archives.
My name is John O'Rourke, and I'm an undergraduate at the University of Texas at Austin studying history and geography. Research in 19th century Mexican sources and GIS-based approaches underpin the creation of an interactive web map that enables users to spatially explore the British Library's recently digitized Libros de Huellas collection. The interactive web map shows 228 communities in the Mexican state of Michoacan that participated in the liberal privatization of corporate indigenous land holdings during the late 19th and 20th centuries, officially known as Reparto de Tierra.
Hi, my name is Roslyn and I'm a self-taught surface pattern designer. In retaliation to all the racism and negativity towards Black people, I felt moved to produce some work that projects positivity, is joyous and instills pride for me, my family and the wider community. With the use of the British Library digital images, I was able to realise my ideas and create a collection of products that bring jubilation and self-esteem to the fore. Cheers, and thank you for watching.
That shouldn't be there. It wasn't my mind saying I don't want to be Indian, because I've always been proud of who I am. I have a strong sense of identity, but to me, it wasn't important at the time.
I have crossed an ocean. I have lost my tongue. From the root of the old one, a new one has sprung.
In the Spotlight is a crowdsourcing project where online volunteers work with the collections of the British Library. The complex design of these playbills means they're hard for computers to read, so the project asks the public to help transcribe some of the text. Thousands of people from all around the world have helped complete nearly 250,000 tasks. But it's the comments and discussion that make this community so special. I often tweet these comments so that others can share the hidden delights of this important collection. We've had some great discussions on the project forum and on social media. The generosity of this community in sharing their time, curiosity and knowledge is a truly wonderful thing.
Hi, my name is Gustavo Candela, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Research Libraries team at the University of Alicante.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for still being with us at the British Library Labs Awards. We are going to continue celebrating all different categories and great people who have done brilliant things with our digital collections this year. So next is our Community Award, and it's my pleasure to introduce Liz White, the British Library Head of Public Libraries and Community Engagement, to tell you more about this.
Thanks, Maya. My name's Liz White. I'm Head of Public Libraries and Community Engagement at the BL. It's my first time announcing the Community Awards, and it's a great privilege to be here. Thank you. The Community Award is for an activity or work or project that's been created by an individual or group in a community and inspired by or using the BL's collections and data. This year we had 6 entries, and we're able to commend 4 of them for some fantastic work. The first special commendation goes to The Unearthed Odyssey by Awate Suleiman, who's a rapper, multimedia artist and youth worker from Camden, the local community where the British Library St Pancras site is in London. We were particularly impressed how Awate worked with British Library staff before and during lockdown and with school children from South London to unpack his journey of research in the BL to make this piece, teaching at the Roundhouse in London and Fairbeats in Lewisham, and recording voices from immigrant children to be used in some of his pieces. Well done, Awate, great work. Another special commendation goes to Inspiring computationally driven research with the BL's digital collections. A GLAM notebooks approach is from Spain by Maria Dolores Saez, Gustavo Candela and Pilar Escobar from the Research Libraries team in the Department of Software and Systems University of Alicante. You may already have heard of this entry before during today. It was in fact the most nominated in multiple categories. The panel particularly loved the generosity of the group in developing computational access to 12 gallery, library, archive and museums data through Jupyter notebooks. Many of these organisations don't have the capacity or expertise to do this. So this was some really kind and fantastic work, helping to move these organisations forward computationally. A great contribution to the GLAM Labs community, initiated of course by Mahendra at BL Labs. Please find out more about the project at the URLs above and about GLAM Labs themselves at glamlabs.io. And I can reveal the winner is In the Spotlight. The panel had tremendous difficulty separating two entries that were submitted for this award, so we've decided that they're both winners. In the Spotlight Volunteers was nominated by Mia Ridge, digital curator at the British Library, on behalf of thousands of volunteers, adding information to digitised historic playbills of plays and performances with nearly 250,000 tasks. Second winner, volunteer georeferences with over 50,000 maps georeferenced, was nominated on behalf of the volunteers by Gethlin Rees, digital mapping curator. It took them nearly 6 years to georeference over 50,000 maps. Incredible and epic work that deserves a tremendous amount of recognition. Previously, James Hild and Maurice Nicholson from the community have been recognised for their excellent work. BL Labs will be donating the prize money to a humanitarian mapping charity and one that supports out-of-work actors who've been especially affected by the pandemic. Let's hear a little bit more about the work of each from Mia.
The crowdsourcing project where online volunteers work with the collections of the British Library. The complex design of these playbills means they're hard for computers to read, so the project asks the public to help transcribe some of the text. Thousands of people from all around the world have helped complete nearly 250,000 tasks. But it's the comments and discussion that make this community so special. I often tweet these comments so that others can share the hidden delights of this important collection. We've had some great discussions on the project forum and on social media. The generosity of this community in sharing their time, curiosity and knowledge is a truly wonderful thing.
In 2014, the library released 50,000 images of maps onto the georeferencer, extracted from millions of images available open access on Flickr from 17th to 19th century books. I am delighted to say that the collection has been completed and much of the coordinate data added to our catalogue, offering a really innovative metadata perspective. This isn't about me. I'm proud to represent our georeferencer community. A massive thank you to them.
Many congratulations and thank you.
Many thanks, Liz, to announcing these awards, and many congratulations to all the winners. And now we are going to move to the British Library Staff Award. So to announce this award, we have with us Jazz Fry, the British Library Head of People. Over to you, Jazz.
Hi, Maya. Thank you very much. I am so proud and honoured to be introducing these awards. So my name is Jazz Rye. I am the Head of People here at the British Library. It is my first time presenting the BL Labs Staff Awards. So I'm just going to do a quick technical check because I know it wasn't so successful when I tried earlier. So is everybody able to see my screen?
Yeah, it's looking great. You might want just to put it on the slide share rather than presentation.
This is exactly what happened earlier. So let me just try that one again.
That's okay. It's all trials of Zoom. Well done.
Right, let's do that again. This is the problem when you have multiple screens. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, is that working for everybody now? You're going to say no.
It's the same as before, but I think we can go with that. It's fine.
Okay, let's try that.
That's
is that okay? Fantastic. Okay, so thank you very much. Yes, I mean, these awards are established in 2016 to highlight the work the British Library staff have done with its data and or digital collections. It gives recognition to staff who have created something brilliant connected with the library's data and digital collections. And this year we have had an amazing 13 entries, the most we've ever had. And the work has ranged from digitising watermarks, from pages of old books and manuscripts, to creating the first suite of Jupyter notebooks to explore our digitised newspaper collections. Many projects demonstrated how our staff responded to the pandemic, such as moving what was originally a set of physical events to go entirely online in the case of the Leeds exhibition, and learning teams. The teams behind the Unlocking Our Sounds heritage, collaboration with rapper Awate to finding and preparing COVID-19 specific materials for the public. Creating a guide on how to develop art using the British Library's Flickr Commons collection, and online tour of the Qatar National Library. I'd like to acknowledge and thank everyone who entered or was nominated or has nominated someone or a team. It's really important to know our talented staff contribute significantly to the innovative use of data and digital collections at the British Library, and this is why the BL Labs Staff Awards exist. We don't have time to go through all of the entries, so let's get straight onto awarding the prizes. And first, let's go to special commendations. We received a number of entries which describe journeys of staff learning more about technology and then using what they learned to enable innovation in their work. We would like to give special commendation to 2 members of staff who the panel felt were worthy exemplars of this. Nick Dykes, curator for Modern Maps Collections, who computationally extracted text from 2,000 maps using Google Vision technology. Well done, superb. And Graham Jevon, Endangered Archives Programme Cataloguer, EAP. Initially inspired by a one-day digital scholarship training course about a data cleaning tool called Open Refine, he built a tool and workflow to improve the cataloguing processes with 43,000 lines of code, which can be executed in one click, and secondly, built tools to improve the referencing process in cataloguing. Both developed their work further after completing a pilot course called Computing for Cultural Heritage, a collaboration between Nora McGregor from British Library's Digital Research Team and the National Archives, and funded by the Institute of Coding. And now on to the runner-up. And Courtney, cataloguer of golf history at the British Library's Qatar project, created a musical piece from the India Office Records catalogue records. She did this by using the place names to connect with different instruments, dates in records connected to the timing of the music, and how the data is then related affected the interaction with the instruments. The panel were really impressed with this very thoughtful and innovative way of discovering our collections. It was almost like leaving an acoustic memory of the peoples that these records are about. Let's see and hear a bit more about this entry. And please note that the following video is sound and text only, so there is no voice. And a bit of a surprise. So firstly, well done. That was fantastic. I've listened to that a few times actually today, and it's mind-blowing every time. So secondly, yes, we have another runner-up. Can you believe? And this time I'd like to present Victoria Morris, an online metadata analyst in the British Library's collection metadata team. She did some pioneering computational work using machine learning to detect missing information about the language of catalogue records. The panel were really impressed with the innovation and the incredible impact of the work, identifying 471 languages in the records, 141 of which were not previously represented, with the addition of language codes to 3,196,285 records. Well done, Victoria, and the colleagues you collaborated with. What fantastic work. Let's see a bit more about this work, and please note that again, the video contains text and music with no voice. Okay, let me just go on to the next slide and see if that resumes. Oh, I'm just trying to click on, so bear with me. There we go. Simple. Okay, and now on to the winner of this year's British Library Staff Award. The panel found it really difficult to actually compare between two entries as they were so different. So actually, I'm very privileged to be announcing that we have two winners this year. And the first here we go. The first is Guilla Carla Rossi with the British Library Simulator. Well done. And the second is the British Library Qatar Foundation Partnership Team, who address problematic terms in the British Library's catalogues. So let's hear more about the British Library Simulator first. Fantastic. The simulator was created by Guilla in May 2020 using Bitsy and has been viewed more than 5,000 times, with most use during the period when the library was closed to the public. It has attracted press attention in the UK and in Europe. Subsequent attention has come from another national library in Europe and also a student and librarian in the US who's preparing a Fulbright application to study interactive storytelling and games in the UK. Guilla followed up the simulator by leading a hack and yak session organised by the Digital Scholarship Team on Bitsy for library colleagues. A BL colleague has produced a simulator for the Qatar Digital Library as a result of this. This was a unanimous favourite with the judging panel, and thank you, Grilla, for such a fun project. It's truly exciting. It's fantastic. And now on to the second winner. The second winner, as already mentioned, is from the British Library's Qatar Foundation team. So congratulations go to Serim Abushi, Mariam Abelez, Louis Auday, Sotirios Alpanis, John Casey, David Fitzpatrick, Susanna Gillard, John Hayhurst, Julia Inowich, William Monk, Hannah Nagel, Naomi Ortega Raventos, Francis Awatram, Kirstade Reed, George Saman, Tahani Shaban, David Woodbridge, Nariman Youssef, and a special thanks to the BAME staff network. Apologies if I've mispronounced any of your names. And this is incredibly important work, as it's something that continues to require attention. Perhaps it's fair to say that it's getting more focus now, particularly with the fight against racial injustice and the Black Lives Matter movement. Congratulations to everyone. We know this work isn't easy, but it is most definitely needed. Let's hear a bit more about this work from the team.
As you're listening to the slides, you're noticing that we are having a sound problem. So apologies to all. I think the visuals will tell you lots more about this work. And we will repost the slides with the sound on shortly. Apologies, Jazz, as well.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realise we didn't have sound. I couldn't see any of the comments.
That's all right. It's challenges of Zoom and technology, but we will repost them again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jazz. Thank you so much, everyone, for bearing with us during this time. Many congratulations from all of us again to all the winners today, but also to all those who submitted their work. Our special thanks, especially to those that we haven't even mentioned today. Your work definitely matters, and everybody's winner today. And now I have to say the sentence that I always wanted to say, which is to do with our public awards, and to inform you that the voting is now closed. So after that, we now have an honor of our EndNote speaker, and we are delighted to have with us today Anasuya Sengupta. So Anasuya is an author, archivist, and poet. She's a co-director of Whose Knowledge, that's focusing on marginalized voices on the internet and broader. She's co-author of the book Defending Our Dreams: Global Feminist Voices for a New Generation. Her work seeks to reimagine the internet and the world for a better and more just future, and it is our honor to have her as our last speaker today. Anasuya, we're handing over to you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you today. Oh my goodness, I've been watching the presentations, listening to the work, and just thinking to myself, what a, you know, when they say it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to raise a library, and such a library as this, with all its complex histories and hopeful presence. And it's such an honor to be here, sitting in my East London flat, I'll admit, but speaking to all of you, because what a year it's been, a year that's a decade, that's a lifetime. And it has given us brutal gifts. And some of those brutal gifts, I think, we saw today in the remarkable work that all of you have done, that everyone who has been working with British Library staff have pulled off. And of course, we've learned what it means when you bring knowledge and scholarship and digital infrastructure together. So I'm just so happy to be with a collection and a community of fellow nerds. So thank you again. I'm going to speak today by telling you a little bit about myself and then talking you through, in some ways, the journey that we at Whose Knowledge have taken. Whose Knowledge, as Maya said, is an online multilingual campaign to center the knowledges of marginalized communities who happen to be the majority of the world online. And yet we cannot do that work without thinking about what it means to question knowledge itself, and whose knowledge do we mean is knowledge. So for me, just to say, I was born in India. I spent all my childhood and my early adulthood in India. I grew up in a sort of desert in North Karnataka, which is in southern India. And I never dreamed that I would either study in the UK, which I did, or that I would live in the US, which I did for a few years, till last year when I came back to London, back to the land of my colonizers, as it were, and just in time for some stirring events. But just as, you know, Awate's beautiful presentation earlier talked and honored Grace Nichols' poem, I do feel I have crossed many oceans and I'm still trying to find my tongue. But as I do so, I want to honor all of the voices, all of the bodies, all of the souls, all of the brilliance, all of the brilliant minds that have helped me come here, including that of my compañeras and co-founders, Siko Bouters and Adele Vrana, who would have loved to join you, but it's a little too early in California. All right, what will I talk about today? I will walk you through some thoughts on decolonizing knowledge and decolonizing the internet. Why do we do this work? A little context setting. I will talk you through some of what we have had to unpack for ourselves around power, colonialism, and decolonization to help you understand why we think it's such an important frame and such an important set of practices. And then leave you with a few questions and thoughts about what this might mean for all of you at the British Library. So how did we get here? I'm going to offer you some numbers and context. Whose Knowledge is online. So our frenemies at Google did some sort of estimates a few years ago and projections, and they projected that there have been about 130 million books ever published, mostly in 480 languages. There's an exception, I'll come to it. There are over 7,000 languages in the world, which means, just back of the envelope calculations, only about 7% of the world's knowledge is in books. So the outlier, as you'll see, is the Bible, that has been translated into over 2,500 languages. And, you know, that the history of the Bible traveling across the world is a history we will talk about a little bit more. The most translated document in the world is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in over 350 languages. The commonality of both of those things, coming from very different, potentially, arguably, motivations, is of a universality that takes for granted what the universal is. And it does not have at the core of it the centering of context and of community to create their own sense of what rights might mean, what faith and culture might be, what belief is. So just a thought to start with. Whose knowledge is online? So coming onto the digital world, into the digital world, most online content is in English, with Russian a very trailing second. Most users access the internet in English and then in Chinese. Most scholarly publications, including digital publications, are in English. 80% of scientific journals, 90% of social science journals indexed on Scopus and JSTOR are in English. But who is online then? So we know that over 60% of the world is now online. And by online, of course, we mean access is differentiated. People have differential access based on whether they even have electricity, never mind a Wi-Fi connection. But even through the smartphone, which is how the majority of the world accesses the internet, over 60% of the world is now online. 75% of those who are online are from the global south, from Asia and the Pacific Islands, from Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, from the Middle East. 48% of all women are now online, though men are 21% more likely to be online. Surprise. But when you look at this, it begs the question, does the internet look like us? So who builds internet infrastructure? 5% of leadership positions are held by women. In the USA, women only hold 25% of computing roles. Only 6% of technical workers at Apple are Black. And when you look at scholarship, say in the UK, so to bring knowledge and digital infrastructure together, which I'm going to do throughout this talk, of over 2,000 full professors in the UK, only 25 are Black women. So the internet, our libraries, our knowledge infrastructures do not look, sound, read like most of us in the world. So how do we change this? What is the road or paths, the unexpected journeys to decolonization and transformation? Let's begin with knowledge itself. We had to do within the Who's Knowledge community our own understanding and remembering of what power means. Because we use this word power so often that sometimes it's helpful to go back to the basics. So this is a very quick ride through the basics. When we talk about power, we think about power in multiple ways, but in this case, the point I want to make is to be able to analyze what structural power means. We talk about systems of power. We've been talking about white supremacy and structural racism all summer. When we say that, what does it mean? It means that at the level of structure, not just the level of the individual, we have power, or those who have power in the system, have power to answer these questions and to make certain that the answer is one that they like. Who does what? Who gets what? Who sets the agenda? Who decides what? And so power and privilege, continuing, and this is particularly important for all of us in the glam business, in the storytelling world, in the knowledge business. Whose story is it? What is the story? Who is the storyteller and curator? Whose knowledge is it? Whose artifact? Whose data? And most importantly, whose imagination, design, and leadership? So that's sort of Power 101. I did a speed drive through it, but I want to spend a little time around knowledge itself. And this frame of knowledge has been so helpful to us at whose knowledge as we've sort of unpacked our own work and turned it into practice. So here's someone who you might not expect me to be honoring and talking about, but yes, Michael Polanyi, Hungarian-British physical scientist, who talked about the difference between embodied knowledge and disembodied knowledge. And what Polanyi said was this, that all of us are knowledge, but the act of turning knowledge that is embodied as we speak, as we write, as we dance, as we sing, into formal knowledge needs an artifact, and it needs institutional authority. So for instance, Olive Morris, the extraordinary Caribbean-British activist, organizing in Brixton and across London, is known to her community, but would not be known further to the rest of the UK and the rest of the world without the artifacts of the photographs, the speeches, the texts that exist from her and about her work. And I remember a beautiful photograph being in a British Library exhibition earlier this year called Unfinished Business. That is the process of constructing formal knowledge. And the British Library authority in some ways makes it that much more legitimate and credible. And yet the only thing that disconnects from the knowledge that we embody is the artifact. So keeping that in mind, why do we call it epistemic injustice? Because whose knowledge is formalized, whose institutional authority formalizes this knowledge. So Miranda Fricker, a British philosopher, feminist philosopher, puts it this way. She talks about two different versions of the ways in which we discriminate against different people's knowing. One is testimonial, and the other is hermeneutical. In testimonial injustice, we disbelieve someone because we disbelieve the community from which they come from. So a Black man or a brown man on the streets of London and how the police treat them. In hermeneutical injustice, we disbelieve someone because the concept that they bring is too alien to us, or we want it to be too alien to us. So for instance, a woman bringing a case of sexual harassment in a culture that does not want to accept the notion of sexual harassment itself. Both of those realities, unfortunately, are very much alive and present today. So then let's move to decolonization. How do power, epistemic injustice, and decolonization come together? Let's start with what is decolonization? It's the personal and systemic unpacking and dismantling of historical structures of power and privilege that govern the ways we live our lives today. This is why it matters, why history matters. And this is the lovely thing about talking to a community of extraordinary British librarians. I don't need to tell you that history matters. In some of the places that I speak, it's a harder sell. But who we are, how we think, what we get, what we do, how we do, and again, who is the expert, who designs, and who leads. So moving from the notion of knowledge itself to digital knowledge and the internet, I want to draw this arc that is historical as well as about practice so that we get to why it's so important for the British Library as a whole, for BL Labs, and knowing and honoring all the work that you've already been doing in this field, especially in the last few years, especially this year. So a really important and very difficult truth that we all must acknowledge is that the construction of race and what it has meant in the ways we think about the differences, the so-called differences between race, are a construction because colonization needed rationale. It was a rationale for European and particularly British rulers, and British scholars, anthropologists, and others were involved in this great, astonishing, cruel illusion that people are different, and they're different in this particular way through race, not just different, but inferior or superior. The rationality, so-called rationality of inferiority and superiority, then gives us the rationale for colonization, for slavery, for the labor, for the resources that come out of the global south into Europe and then into North America, and construct a capitalist system. When tech capital takes on these inequities and forms of racism and discrimination and doesn't question the world that it lives in, we end up with digital colonialism, because the internet, even as we imagine it to be a democratic, emancipatory space, and of course it can be that, we can only be talking today with it. We can only be seeing all the extraordinary work done through it. But if we don't acknowledge that the internet not just amplifies or sort of reflects the inequities of our physical worlds and our historical inequities, it reifies it in many ways, we will not be able to change our reality. And it's important to remember that this narrative arc, this historical arc, and the arc in practice has 4 key elements that we are combating and needing to challenge. One is resources. Who has the resources? Not just money, but especially, as we think about it, the artifacts of knowledge, the resources of historical, cultural heritage. Hierarchies of people, inferiority and superiority, making certain races or certain peoples superior to others. Hierarchies of knowledge. Walter Mignolo, who is an Argentinian semiotician, puts it beautifully. He says, why is it that knowing in the first world is called knowledge, and knowing in the third world is called culture? So even the hierarchies of knowledge versus culture, which is why, if you notice, I have been very careful to stick to the word knowledge in this case, in much of what I'm saying. And then finally, the disembeddedness and the disembodiedness of people, that we can think of people just as bodies, units of body, units of labor, both in the real world and in the digital world, without giving them dignity, without giving them the ability and the environment to be proud and to be respected and to be full and whole as humans. So our work at Whose Knowledge is the radical notion that people are knowledge. We do this in a few ways, but I will talk you through a couple of quick examples. One of the people that we admire so much is the Maori scholar Linda Tuhiwai-Smith, whose book Decolonizing Methodologies I urge you all to read. The second line in her book is, research is the dirtiest word in the indigenous vocabulary. And this is why, this is because of the history we have just been talking about of colonization. But Tuhiwai-Smith asks us explicitly not to see decolonization as a metaphor. She says it is a practice. And for us, that is deeply important. Just talking about it isn't enough. What does it mean in practice? How do we do this work? So a couple of ways we do it. We run, for instance, every March to May, an exhibition, an online campaign and exhibition called Visible Wiki Women, where we bring the photographs of women who are largely invisible on Wikipedia onto Wikipedia. So Wikipedia's biographies are mostly of men. 3/4 of all biographies on Wikipedia are of men. Then if you look at those biographies, and I imagine all of you look at Wikipedia biographies, only about maybe, if we're lucky, 20% of those biographies of women have images. So the invisibility runs deep. Another way in which we do our work is to work deeply with a few communities to understand from them and to center them and their imaginations in the work that needs to be done around decolonizing knowledge and the internet. So Our Stories, Our Knowledges is a set of resources about that work. And that again is something that is available on our website, openly licensed. So we would love you to read it and honor the communities, the voices, and the brilliance that is in it. The second thing that is a deeply important practice for us is to center not just the scholarship, but the imagination of those of us who have been marginalized historically. Because our joy, our creativity is as important in the centering as our histories of oppression. So as Audre Lorde said, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies. So one of the ways we do it is we convene a Decolonizing the Internet meeting every year. We will, of course, be doing it digitally next year. But this convening is to bring together folks from the open knowledge movement, Wikipedians, glam folks, techies, artists, everyone who, just as you have done at British Library, needs to come together to reimagine and redesign the internet to be for and from us all. I want to come back to the British Library now with, again, some difficult data. I want to ground us in what colonization did to India, because of course I understand this, and it's very close to me, but we will use it to extrapolate. A remarkable feminist economist a couple of years ago did this calculation that over the 200 years of British colonization, $45 trillion was siphoned out of India. And of course, all of the claims that, we hear from those who, let's put it this way, colonial adjacent, if not sympathetic. What about the trains? What about life expectancy? Those have all been systematically debunked by scholars. Life expectancy dropped and it increased by 70% post-independence. Infrastructure killed. The trains were in order to send soldiers to places to quell insurgencies. So Britain didn't develop India, India developed Britain. Wakanda is not an Afro-future, it's a possible Afro-past. Because if we think about what we did just in India, in terms of the rest of the global South, in terms of Africa and other Asian countries, as well as, of course, earlier Latin America, in terms of Portugal and Spain, then we need to recognize how much came out of these nations and these spaces. And not just in terms of money, but in terms of imagination, in terms of artifact, in terms of knowledge. So back to British Library, and I'm so grateful for this wonderful blog post I read earlier this year around the anti-racism work that all of you are undertaking, and I'm so in awe of the work that you are already doing. But let me end with what I promised, which is tongue-in-cheek, how to decolonize the British Library in 3 very uneasy steps. I think it's really important that we come to terms with whose knowledge sits in most GLAM institutions in the global north. It's not your knowledge. So you have to center the communities whose knowledge it is. You cannot control them. This is messy because communities are not homogeneous, but far better to do that messy work than to pretend it should not exist. It's not your artifact. So respect, not own. And once again, questions and conversations around reparations and repatriations and return, I know, are deeply complex. I am not in any way undermining their complexity. But once again, we have to have these messy conversations. Far better to have them than to pretend we don't need to. And finally, none of us can be saviors of each other. And whether as GLAM institutions or as individuals, we're here to serve the communities whose knowledge it is. It is hard to say, but I will say it. Those who cause the problem cannot imagine or lead the solution, but they can and must support it. And so for myself, the identity that I hold with such uneasy discomfort is the identity of caste, because I come from an upper caste family, even though I don't have class or gender privilege, though of course I have education. And all of these things that I say to you, I in turn think about as practice with Dalit Bahujan and Adivasi folks, with indigenous folks in India. This is my work as much as it is yours. And so finally, in terms of GLAM institutions and the British Library, the questions that we must be asking each other all the time, other than who is missing in this room, virtual or otherwise. Who or what do we archive and curate? Who does this curating? How do we preserve? In what forms and languages? How do we preserve and honor oral knowledge? How resilient is this content? How open is this content? Who is it open to? And then, of course, nothing without citation. Whose knowledge do we cite and how? And finally, this work is messy. It is uncomfortable. It needs to be uncomfortable, but it does liberate us all. It can be joyful. And so to quote a lesbian feminist from the US, revolution is a symphony of liberations. And to quote a wonderful South African feminist, it just takes a little love, courage, and insubordination. Thank you very, very much. And over to you, Maya. I'm sure there will be many questions and I look forward to them.
Thank you so much. That was just an amazing talk to come at the end of our day, and really messages that that we were thinking about very actively in the last few months, especially. I think I'm hoping that people are going to put their questions in Q&A box, because in the chat it's going to be difficult for me to identify them rather quickly. But while they're doing that, maybe I'll use my privileged position here and ask you a couple of questions of my own. Is that all right?
Of course.
So it's really amazing. Your messages for the library are very pertinent and are very much going to be on our mind. But early in your presentation, you talked quite a lot about this disconnect between institutions and people and artifacts, and in many ways that turns around this paradigm that we have in our head that this institutional knowledge and artifact comes first, and things kind of are centered around that. And you're challenging us as saying it's not, people are knowledge. So how do you actually see in real life that relationship transforming itself? How do we put people's knowledge first?
That's a great question. And again, it'll come back to practice, as we've been saying. I think even in exactly as you're saying, making that turn in the framing, is so critical. So when we start with institutional authority, institutions have an inertia, they have a gravity that is seductive, you know, let's be honest. And I think in some ways, this is a seduction we have to challenge. If we start with the deep conviction, the embodied conviction that people are knowledge, then institutions exist to serve people, to serve the relationships between people, to serve the communities of knowledge and practice that people create, and then the artifacts of that knowledge that people create get preserved and curated in institutions, but institutions are always in service to, rather than people in service to institutions. And then, of course, through that being co-opted, assimilated, ignored, undermined, invisibilized, and all the rest of it. I think there is something very dramatic. And this is why I use an old-fashioned word like praxis, because there is something about bringing frames and practice together that is deeply important. And it's why I spoke as I did. I could have spent much more time in the work that we do, but it felt important, especially to this extraordinary community of folks, to bring it to praxis.
Thank you so much. That is really invaluable advice and one that will inspire us for a long time. I have a first question here from Javier Parada, who said, this was an epic talk. I wonder, how do we engage with the issue of languages? When there is a massive centrality towards Anglo-centric narratives in research due to a wide range of biopolitical factors, how could we highlight the relevance of non-Anglo-based discourses to Western institutions who commonly depend on English language, example in publications, teaching, engagement, etc.?
That's another excellent question. I think about it all the time. We at Whose Knowledge think about it all the time. Our communities around the world, unsurprisingly, think about it all the time. I'm also Wikipedian. And the interesting thing is I edit in English because this is what colonization has done to me. I am Thomas Babington Macaulay's bastard, as I like to say, because Macaulay was the person who wrote a minute on education that said, when we leave India, we will leave behind a group of people who are brown in color and English in sensibility and intellect. So the fact that I speak all the languages I do, but that I now am English first, even though it's not my native language, just shows you the angst that so many of us feel who are not English native and who have to live in the world in our languages, or without our languages, as the case may be. A couple of things, Javier. One, that I think it's important to keep bringing up the issue of language, because language is a very important proxy for knowledge. Any one of us who is even bilingual, or even in English, you know, the language of expertise, for instance, the archivist talking to the librarian, talking to the digital librarian, the words we use, the vocabulary we use is a way of knowing, right? And when you take that into the languages that we otherwise know, language is a significant proxy for knowledge. So even asking the question, what language is this in? What other languages could it be in? How can we make it multilingual is, I think, a really important piece of the puzzle. Citing in references that are not in English for those of us who are lucky enough to speak and read in other languages and who know the truth of the power of that scholarship. You know, if we're talking about decolonization, what happens when we cite Boaventura de Sousa Santos in Spanish or in Portuguese, right? And even then, I'm using colonial languages because on the internet, most people in the world have to use their nearest colonial language in order to access it. So it is a hard question. At Whose Knowledge, just for you to know, we are in fact hoping to bring out early next year. It was supposed to be this summer, but you know, this summer has changed all our lives. So a report on the state of the internet's languages. And in that report, we hope to come up with some useful asks and actions for all of us to do together to make our work more multilingual.
Thank you so much, Ansia. These are amazing thoughts, and we could have been speaking probably all evening long, but here we have truly run out of time, completely and truly. So I hope very much that we are going to see and hear lots more of you at the British Library. And thank you so much for being with us today.
It's such a pleasure and honor. India to British Library, it's a journey that I'm amazed to have made. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anastasia.
Thank you, Mahendra.
So it's left to me to wrap up the symposium, and it's my job now to announce, drumroll, the BL Labs People's Favourite Choice Award for the public entrance. So just give me a second. I'm just going to share screens. Okay. So here we go. So third place with 153 votes is, drumroll, Afro Hair and Its Heritage by Rosalind Henry. Congratulations, Rosalind. I'm hearing some virtual applause now. Well done. Runner-up with 342 votes is Afrobits by Javier Pereda, Patricia Mureta Flores, Nicholas Radburn, Lois South, and Christian Monaghan. Congratulations. We were looking at the voting yesterday and today, and it was kind of neck and neck between you and the winner, but the winner has sort of got away with it. So, but well done. And finally, big drum roll, the BL Labs People's Choice Public Awards 2020, what a bit of a mouthful that is. Winner with 582 votes is the Glam Labs Notebooks approach by the Research Libraries team, the Department of Software and Computer Systems at the University of Alicante, Spain. That's Maria Dolores Saez, Gustavo Candela, and Pilar Escobar, and Manuel Marco Sach. Congratulations. You are the first winner of this. We've never done it before. We thought we would try something different and get the audience involved, and we really did. It really worked. So thank you so much, Gustavo and Maria, and Pilar and Manuel. So congratulations to everyone. So it sounds a little bit corny and cliched, but everyone is a winner. The whole point of the BL Labs Awards is to shine a light on uses of our digital collections to create those moments of potential, and who knows where they can go. So just to finish off, season's greetings to everyone, and have a lovely new year in 2021. Let's hope it's a better one than the one we've had. Lots of warm wishes from us, the British Library Labs team, and other British Library members of staff. And I'm going to leave the channel open with the clip from Awate and just leave that running through for a few minutes so people can leave some comments and feedback. And I know there is also a poll for you to give feedback to us. Please give us some feedback on how we did it. It was very challenging for us to do this online, but I think we're pretty pleased with how it went. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you all in 2021. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen again, and I'm just going to play Awate to go out. So just going to do that now. And
I always spoke in English, and I've got away with it, where I'm quite embarrassed now because my Gujarati is terrible. I would never speak it in front of people because I'm so embarrassed because I have an accent that shouldn't be there. It wasn't my mind saying I don't want to be Indian, because I've always been proud of who I am. I have a strong sense of identity, but to me, it wasn't important at the time.
I have crossed an ocean. I have lost my tongue. From the roots of the old one, a new one has sprung.
If your friends don't know how to speak your language, how are they going to speak to your mum in that language, because they don't know how to? They're not going to speak their language. They're going to speak English instead. Does your mum know English? Wait, so can I? But that doesn't make sense though. But a little bit. I was going to say, well, like sometimes, like, when you're with, like, if you have like a friend with you, and then like you can both speak the same language, and like you have these other friends, and like I've had this time before, but like when I'm with my friend and I speak my language to him, and then all my other friends, they don't really understand what we're saying, and then sometimes it's kind of funny because like they don't really understand it. But like, for example, if like my mum was talking to me in my language and then all my other friends were here, it's kind of embarrassing because like your mum's just there and she's just to the kids it will just be kind of gibberish. Some people may not understand what they hear.
Yes, you have your hand up?
Why did they leave?
So many reasons. Could be drought, floods, famine, natural disasters, like an earthquake or hurricane. People could leave for a change or to make more money. A lot of the time it's many of these, mixed with a man-made disaster like war.
I do remember that I was up with a non-Jewish staff in the school that I taught in Newport, and when they lifted up their ears, literally, they heard that I was engaged and about to marry somebody who'd come from Prague, Czechoslovakia, they were terribly worried, and they said, "What do you feel about the situation?" And it was at the time when Neville Chamberlain came back from a meeting with Hitler and waved this letter and said, "Peace in our time," that he's promised he's not going to do this, that and the other. So they were very keen to know my attitude. And I look back now and realise how naive I was. And I said, well, if indeed it's going to be peace, maybe that's best for everyone. But we did not know the extent how the Jewish people were suffering. It was not coming through. Little by little, the people were saying it, and it was so horrible that we began to think that it was almost exaggerated. But of course, the full knowledge came as soon as we were married, and then Dr. Schoenfeld also started his Scarlet Pimpernel business of going across to rescue the children. But they were two lovely girls. So I suddenly felt I had twins. And he brought them home to me. Well, of course, as I said, our hearts went out to these children. Talk about crying every night. We had to cuddle them and kiss them. And there was a letter inside her attaché case with a big box of talcum powder from the mother. Please look after my little girl. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Bath her every night and use this powder. She's used to it. And so I did. Then meanwhile, we were busy getting the hostel ready. We said we didn't want it as a grim place. It was going to be as near home for those children as we could get. We did not know. We did not know. We did not know.
Are we gonna meet aliens?
Why'd you ask? Have you seen any?
No, I haven't seen any.